let's jump right into this. Vinay, I tried inviting you up, but Vinay and Amay. I never realized those two names were so similar. Vinay and Amay. I tried to invite both of you up, and it didn't let me. So you might have to pop out and pop in.
Who is the evil twin of the two?
Vinay and Amay.
Just quickly, Johan, another thing that I've noticed on with Clubhouse is that you have the microphone indicator at the top. There are periods where you're on stage where that no longer is active permanently. So there have been periods where if I'm on stage and I'm quiet for a period, I haven't pinned down exactly when it's happening, but it looks like it actually disengages the microphone. And then when you start to speak, it quickly engages it again. I've noticed that sometimes it's like a 500 millisecond sort of 1 second delay before it actually activates. So that's interesting. Like at the moment it's showing, but there have been rooms I've been in where I've been on stage and it doesn't show that my microphone is being accessed by Clubhouse. So I'm not sure what they've done there.
Interesting.
Okay. Are we ready to do this? Okay. Welcome back, everybody. Did Cheryl? It's a little spooky quiet. Does that mean Cheryl's not on stage? It seems a little unusually quiet without Cheryl on stage. What happened to Cheryl?
She disappeared.
Yeah, she did. Oh, shoot. Let me try something here. Cheryl. Cancel.
We're missing Lakisha too.
Yes, we are. What's going on? Okay, I'm pinging Cheryl now. Okay, and let's try and ping Lakeisha too. Lakeisha.
On the related topic of audio quality and streaming services, I'm guessing you've seen or even discussed in the room the potential leaks around Spotify, that the hi-fi is rumored to be imminently launching very, very soon.
Oh, like a lossless audio?
Yeah, they've been playing around with it and teasing it since the beginning of the year, because obviously like Deezer and even Amazon Music. Amazon Music, once I think Apple brought theirs out, and Amazon Music basically said, well, that's really nice, ours is really good, and we're going to bundle it lossless CD quality in for free with our existing users, basically, with the basic subscription. And then Spotify have been like lagging behind. But they've been teasing it since the beginning of the year, and then an insider source, I'll try and find the tweet and ping it, basically released screenshots and said, coming imminently. So they said at the beginning of the year that it would be at the later end of 2021, and obviously sort of EU and US is normally their target markets to start with. So crossing my fingers, because I love Spotify, but the lack of lossless audio is a real kicker. I mean, you can hear the difference even between, for instance, like Amazon lossless and Spotify high quality at the moment. There's a very real difference as soon as you put like a decent set of headphones on.
Interesting. I think part of that is, the whole market decided it was, and it's partly hardware dependent, right? Like the earphones are finally at a point where you can really benefit from additional audio fidelity, and with the Apple AirPod Max and even the Apple AirPod Pro or whatever. And then I believe it was Apple themselves who, because of their own hardware, decided to go lossless, and then Spotify, they basically have no choice but to go along once Apple's done that. And by the way, Tidal already had it. That was kind of their unique differentiator when they launched, right?
Yeah, they started the race. They started all this.
Right, but no, people didn't really take to Tidal in a big way, so that kind of didn't really put the pressure on Spotify and Apple. Had Tidal taken off, it would have put a lot of pressure for them to replicate that, higher bandwidth audio. But now that Apple's doing it, who knows why they're really doing it, but then Spotify really does need to do it. So, welcome back, everybody. Happy Tuesday, wherever you happen to be. Here are the biggest stories at this very moment across the web. The first one up is from CoinDesk. There's a related article from Financial Times and another one from Bloomberg. So we'll hit on all three kind of back to back here. And the first one is that the president of El Salvador says the country bought 400 bitcoins on Monday as the law making Bitcoin legal tender in El Salvador goes into effect today, September 7th. So El Salvadorians are waking up to a whole new crypto-powered world. And what does that mean for El Salvadorians yet? Well, we will no doubt see headlines later today and tomorrow and the next day and every day for the next 2 weeks. No doubt there will be stories, as no doubt there are journalists on the ground there, especially journalists both for and against Bitcoin, to create narratives about, try and read the smoke signals and tea leaves about what this could mean for other countries and the rest of the world and the crypto markets and everything else. So the second article is from Financial Times that crypto adoption is accelerating in the developing world, especially in regions with a history of financial instability like sub-Saharan Africa and Asia Pacific. In Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital, a software coder bills her client in London and is paid in Bitcoin, etc., etc. So it's interesting to note that the places that are getting adoption, like El Salvador, like Nigeria, are places that really don't have their own grand plans for their own. Well, Nigeria is now working on its own central bank digital currency, so I shouldn't go too far down that trail. But El Salvador is not really in a position to do their own thing. And it seems like Latin America kind of wants to do a united thing around Bitcoin. So I'm still guessing that is still sort of my guess, is that it will be Latin America that unites around Bitcoin specifically, and that it enables them to have a shared currency. And El Salvador is really a test. And as much as the rest of the world is now watching El Salvador, I bet their Latin American neighbors are watching it with especially closely.
So, Tyler,
Yeah, for the past week and a half, just want to say this quickly. I've been sending I believe articles about just Nigeria's move towards just the metaverse and like creating better blockchains and cryptocurrencies as well. Like, so there's been constant movement and it's been quite fast and heavy towards creating their own like decentralized currency, and the banks are low key in a frenzy, but it seems like Nigeria is making it a big move and it's very important for them.
There was
we also,
yeah, go ahead. Was that Donna? There was a female voice
yeah,
there. Yeah.
I was going to say, we also saw a draft. I'm getting a translated draft of Panama's new crypto regulation, which would go beyond, well, so far it seems to go a little bit beyond El Salvador. It is going to make more than one currency acceptable as tender. So we'll have to see where that comes out, but it's just a draft bill. It's 34 pages, so it's not, insignificant. It's not just 3 sentences. So we'll look there, and obviously Panama is a huge trading place with the canal, et cetera. So that's a big step, different than El Salvador. Not to disparage any countries, but obviously in the economic positions of both is quite different.
Yep. And then, Aaron, any thoughts with El Salvador going live today with Bitcoin?
Tyler, I mean, listen, I don't know. When it comes to countries going down the path of cryptocurrency, I think it's opportunistic. I think they realize that the financial world has to move on, and I think it's right for them to do. But no, there's nothing else. I think I would comment on. I would just encourage more countries to be involved, and like you say about joining forces together from South America's perspective, maybe just getting people. I mean, I think embracing regulation. I know I've said this in the past, but decentralized finance and cryptocurrencies and anything that's currently outside of regulation. I think there has been understanding that regulation is needed to be supported to really bring this on board globally and locally in their countries.
Yeah, so
Aaron, can I ask?
Go ahead.
Sorry, go
Go
on.
ahead, Carl.
I was just going to say, can I ask, like, when you say opportunistic, what are the opportunities? As in, I understand the whole DeFi thing and the moving towards decentralized finance, and especially, and I imagine very much so for Latin America, to be less reliant on the American ecosystem and American finances and the dollar and everything else. But like for El Salvador, what's the immediate opportunities? Why is it opportunistic?
Yeah, it's a great question, Carl. My point is opportunistic in two senses. Like, I don't think the timing is now for Bitcoin, and this is obviously not DeFi, right? But I don't think the timing right now is for Bitcoin, for El Salvador to really get it down to where they're coming from with the unbanked level. But I think what El Salvador are saying is that the world is moving forward when it comes to finance. It is digitizing finance, and things are progressing. We are not going to be left out. So we are going to take the opportunity to say we are here and we're open for the world as it moves forward to work with.
Yeah, and just adding on that, I mean, we are talking about El Salvador. It is in the front of in front page of every paper. That is very opportunistic for a country with the economy size, et cetera, of El Salvador. So I think the president, who, good, bad, or indifferent, he had a career in marketing, and this is a great marketing ploy to get El Salvador in everybody's mind and chatting about it. So, and trying to get business there and moving, and moving in a direction that appears, to be new and novel. And as Aaron just said, we are here and we are technologically moving forward. So pay attention.
And what do people think about like the possibility that there are other people involved in this? Like I know it sounds like a conspiracy or a bad movie, but in the back of my mind, there are definitely people who have very large incentives to make this happen. And you would be looking around the world, and you'd be like, well, we need some sort of state backing. We need to get this backed by a state to validate this and to make people stop worrying about the insecurities and the possible sort of vulnerability of Bitcoin and DeFi in general. So, hey, look, there's a country over there. I can go and talk to them. I can potentially whisper in the right ears. Or am I just, is that too conspiratorial, or is this...
Carl, if you were going to
Yeah,
do a
that's probably too
conspiracy,
conspiratorial.
if you were going to do a conspiracy, if you were going to do a strategy as opposed to a conspiracy, would you pick El Salvador? I would not.
I don't
would
know
pick,
because I have no knowledge of the country. That's why
well, yeah,
that was the question.
I mean, it's not your poster child country,
But
nor
here's
is.
another thing, just to back on that about getting support and who's going to do well out of this. I'm ex Mastercard, and I had a great few years at Mastercard and was I really enjoyed my time. We developed Apple Pay. That was what I was brought on board to do. We brought the world forward in digital payments. But let's be very clear, MasterCard and Visa's, requirement and what they would like supporting is you to spend on cards and get those cards moving around the world, be them digital, be them plastic. Why is it any different when it comes to Bitcoin as another advancement of currency? Why is it different to DeFi? Everyone has something to get out of it. Be you upfront about it, be you behind the scene about it. Somebody's going to win out of this as long as it's right for society, as long as it's right for everybody to do, then shouldn't we support it?
I think it's basically it's just logical for countries like El Salvador or Nigeria or other, because both of those countries, for example, don't have exactly the best reputation for trust and safety, whereas Bitcoin does have, it's decentralized and it's a safer, trusted source. So countries like that strategically could utilize these currencies to say, hey, come do business over here, and you don't have to worry about the political structure that's within here because you have a decentralized, financial system that's trusted. So it does make sense, I think, strategically for countries that don't have the best rep to start using this to get deals going in their countries. Maher Dawdi, none speaking.
El Salvador's dollar based.
Yeah, a lot of these countries are dollar based, and it seems like just as the decoupling of America to the import export, it seems like everyone's trying to decouple from the dollar as well. And as much as I believe it was Maher that said extra security as well. So if your currency isn't trusted, then you use a currency that is, but it's also not tied to any government by any stretch of the imagination.
So this Financial Times article, which is the second of the three on this similar theme, that about developing countries provide fertile ground. Sometimes dismissed as a fad in advanced economies, crypto holds more appeal in countries with a history of financial instability, and that's kind of common sense for anyone who's been in crypto for more than a minute. And it talks about Nigeria. Then it shows a graph. It's got a bunch of really interesting graphs over the past five. The first graph is over the past 5 years where it's been most utilized. And then it says that Asia accounts for half of all cryptocurrency users. So out of the what number is this? What does it mean? 300. Yeah, almost exactly half of all cryptocurrency users are, I guess, out of millions. So it's about 165 million. There's a total of about 280 million crypto users, and about 165 million of those are in Asia. About 45, and the next largest is Europe with about 45 million, and then Africa with about 35, and then America with about 30, and then South America with about 20.
Okay, I'm just starting to see lines here, right? I just posted a new article from TechCrunch. It says Sequoia Heritage and Stripe and others invest 200 million in African fintech wave at 1.7 billion valuation. And if the bit we know Stripe is from Jack Dorsey as well, so it enables cryptocurrency. So we can sort of draw a line between the fintechs and the decentralized coins in, actually being used in certain areas, especially in rural areas as well, where there isn't a central government or even a central coin being used in certain places. Like they're not actually with the markets or actually banking in traditional ways, I should say.
So the countries with the highest global crypto adoption score, according to this article, and is number one is overwhelmingly Vietnam, and then India, then Pakistan, then Ukraine, Kenya, Nigeria, Venezuela. Venezuela is really interesting. Their currency just became totally useless, and so did
Tyler, where's the article from? This one on the rankings?
Financial Times.
Okay, this one's, in my humble opinion, the rankings are completely incorrect. Out of the Nigerian diaspora, around 37%, as we know it, are using cryptocurrencies, and that's a figure primarily known by most people in the cryptocurrency space. I think Donna or anyone in the space who's involved and knows a little bit about Africa would agree with me on that. Nigeria is primarily in any space ranked as number one in terms of usage, in terms of transactions, in terms of volume, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this graph that I'm looking at with Vietnam, basically with a score of about 100. Second place with India with a score of about 38. So it's about 3x above second place with India. And then Pakistan's right neck and neck with India. Then just behind that's Ukraine, then Kenya, then Nigeria, then Venezuela.
Pakistan, completely incorrect. There is no way Pakistan can compete with India on crypto. Absolutely no way.
Well, it makes sense when you actually read what it's measuring. It says the index measures adoption of cryptocurrency by country across 3 metrics: total cryptocurrency value received, retail activity, and peer-to-peer trading volume, weighted by population, so on a percentage of population basis. So Nigeria has
even then for Pakistan, because for Pakistan, the regulatory framework is CPC-ish, if that makes sense. And hence, in Pakistan, the adoption of cryptocurrency has been very, very, very little, and for each of those metrics. And this has just recently started over the past year, whereas India has been in the game much, much longer. So, to me, it just doesn't make sense. But I'll let other individuals be their own decision makers.
Yeah.
And India's just proposing some regulatory framework. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm sure there'll be some, conversation around it, but they are proposing a regulatory framework around crypto now. So, it's gone from the on again, off again, banning it, the Supreme Court to the government. As Aaron said, the good news is when the government starts putting in a regulatory framework, it becomes more acceptable, easier for people and institutions to be involved. Because they know where the bright lines are and where the borders, the regulatory borders are. So that I see those as positive steps. I know there are many people in the Bitcoin world that wish the government would stay out, but I actually do see it as a step in moving towards greater adoption and greater product diversification for all kinds of people and institutions.
So I think it'd be really interesting to see in how the neighbors of El Salvador are no doubt watching closely. No doubt Venezuela's watching closely, in particular, now that their currency has become toilet paper. And I'm looking forward to the follow-up headlines, as everyone's got their eyes sharply on El Salvador now, as the world's first legitimate test of Bitcoin. So the next big article, I mentioned there was 3 on the same theme. The next one's from Bloomberg, and it says crypto exchange Bitso says it is the core service provider of El Salvador's Chivo wallet and will work with Silvergate Bank to facilitate USD transactions. Crypto platform Bitso will work with the U.S. federally regulated Silvergate Bank to facilitate transactions in U.S. dollars, according to a statement from the company. Bitso bills itself as Latin America's fastest-growing crypto platform with over 2.75 million users. Chivo, a vernacular local term for cool, is intended to serve like a mobile payments app, enabling payments in Bitcoin or dollars between individuals and businesses. Bitso said it will offer custody and exchange services to Chivo and provide backend technology. Here's the quote: "We're committed to making crypto useful for the country's citizens," Santiago Alvarado, vice president of Bitso for Business, said in an email, adding it wants to help, quote-unquote, transform payment structures that can increase financial inclusion. El Salvador's passage of the Bitcoin law has been a subject of fascination, praise, and criticism. A recent local poll found a majority of people preferred to use the U.S. dollars. Observers will be watching to see if many people start using Bitcoin and whether that brings benefits to the violent, impoverished nation. Okay, so the next big headline is from TechCrunch about Proton Mail is under fire for disclosing the IP address of French activists in France to Swiss authorities. And why is that? Well, because Proton Mail is based in Switzerland. And why are they based in Switzerland? Because they thought that would protect their users. And Proton Mail labels itself as, privacy email as an alternative to Gmail and all the big tech companies. Proton Mail is end-to-end encrypted and claims that it will only comply with government requests under extreme criminal cases. That's kind of its branding on its website. And now a bunch of French activists who are basically squatting in different buildings around Paris, and they're squatter activists, and they're very upset that Proton Mail gave up their IP addresses to the Swiss authorities at the request of the French authorities. So France could tell, well, these French squatters were using Proton Mail, and it was obvious they were using Proton Mail just by the address, the email address. And then France realized, if they asked Proton Mail, hey, who are these knuckleheads? And Proton Mail says, well, we can't tell you. We have no we're not legally required to fulfill your requests. But they are a Swiss company, so France pinged up their friends in Switzerland through an Interpol hookup and said, hey, Switzerland, we want you to ask one of your companies, Proton Mail, to tell us the IP addresses of this email address. And when Switzerland's authorities came knocking and said that this is a terrorist issue. That was what was implied when they interviewed Proton Mail's CEO. So France is saying that this is kind of like a civil unrest terrorist kind of scenario, although that's kind of a stretch. But that's the quote unquote extreme criminal case scenario that Proton is sort of forced to comply with, because Proton will get in deep doo-doo if they don't comply with kind of scenarios involving terrorism. So Proton Mail gave up the IP address and then was rather quick to say, hey, by the way, if you're using our service, go ahead and use our paid version, which has an onion network that will, even if the authorities come knocking, as in this case, and force us to give up an IP address, it won't actually be your real IP address. It'll be an obfuscated IP address. So please use the paid version is basically what Tor's team is now trying to communicate as a result of replying to the journalists who are reporting on all of this. But what's interesting is the bigger issue. There's another headline coming up later today about how people are running their own servers now for email and for hosting. Now that, which by the way, we must assume is in some way related to the fact that Amazon Web Services last week announced that they're going to be scanning all of the everything that's uploaded to Amazon Web Services. Apple announced that they were going to scan everything in their, well, not everything. They're looking for particular things in their iCloud. And now that the big tech is, complying with governments, it would seem they're not being very transparent about what's motivating Apple and Amazon to all of a sudden have a real keen interest in what people are storing in their clouds. But there's now a boom of people running to things like Proton Mail to maintain privacy, and that's why this headline is catching so many people. It's one of the most popular stories at the moment, is because it's a case where Proton Mail gave up an IP address and in compliance with the Swiss authorities where they are based. And of course, they want to maintain their image of being pro-privacy, so they're now, in this case, really ringing the alarm to remind people to pay for their paid version, which will hide your actual IP address so that when the authorities do come knocking, they can say, oh, we don't actually, here's the IP address we have on file. By the way, we know it's not right because this user is intelligently using what's called like an onion network or the Tor network, which intentionally reroutes everything multiple times so that it's really impossible to know the actual IP address. So kind of these French activists should have really paid for the VPN version of Proton Mail.
I think a number of things on this one. Obviously, it's newsworthy, like you were saying, because this is the motto of Proton Mail. Like, you go to it for the security because them over there, they're bad and they're insecure, and them over there, Google, and Microsoft, they have deals with the American government primarily, is what people are really worried about, I think, a lot of the time. So let's use Proton, but obviously it's not as, it's still secure, but I think the newsworthy parts of this may be the fact that, one, it was a cross-border request. Obviously, like you were saying, it was going from the French over to the Swiss. It was for a reason which normally when you hear about these kind of things, it might cite terrorism or something like that, where they say, well, these were really bad people, that's why we had to pressure them. I mean, these were squatters. It's been going on for a year. They were a pain in the ass and a nuisance, but they hadn't harmed anyone or done anything illicitly illegal that I'd seen. So yeah, like it's a really strange situation to be, and it's going to be interesting to see whether it actually helps Proton Mail move over to that paid subscription, like you were saying, the ultimate. And then if a horde of users actually start using that, it's one thing your users are using a VPN or using the Tor network to obfuscate their IP addresses. It's another thing you providing that service bundled in with data that a government wants. So at that point then, will the government basically say, look, I know you've implemented this, but you're either going to have to stop implementing it or you're going to have to put in a back door. Because it's, in the situation where you were saying where the Swiss government comes knocking and Proton can just hold up their hands and say, well, not us, it's not our fault. Well, we've seen how that goes with the likes of Apple, for instance, and how long those battles, those trials or whatever can be dragged out.
Yeah, but the underlying story in there is the whole why they claim terrorism for squatters. If nobody stands up to that, then the whole
Yeah, absolutely.
that's a huge stretch, right? Like,
Except, except when, for instance, a court order is usually produced, right, through Interpol, and that court order has to have a significant amount of evidence to say that there is reason for this particular account to be to be surveilled. And it's only, after a judge looks at that evidence that he provides that court order. And it's with that court order that they then go to the provider and say, we have a court order, now give us the deeds. So although it might be a stretch, there is a significant amount of checks and balances in place. I mean, the difference between this and, for instance, the Apple thing was that Apple was saying, look, we will protect your privacy if you don't do anything wrong or keeping any illegal items on the server. You'll be fine, right? We'll protect your privacy. Um, and um, but these guys are saying, you know, we will protect your privacy through a different means. They're not saying if you do anything wrong. So you can continue to do, for instance, hold child pornography pictures and commission all sorts of other illegal services, equally reprehensible. But you can do it using, various alternative methods that we will give to you. So, there is a difference.
Okay, so the next big headline is from ProPublica. It says, investigation finds Facebook has over 1,000 contractors moderating WhatsApp, including private messages and media, undermining assurances of WhatsApp privacy, because WhatsApp in recent months now claims to be end-to-end encrypted, which means nobody can see your messages. That's kind of the whole point of end-to-end encryption. And yet again, back to back, the last story was about Proton Mail, which is end-to-end encrypted, and yet a user of Proton Mail got busted by the feds, as they say. And now here comes WhatsApp saying, hold my VPN. And this new investigation finds Facebook has over 1,000 contractors moderating WhatsApp, including private messages, media, under assurances of what. And it says, when Mark Zuckerberg unveiled a new privacy-focused version for Facebook in March of 2019, he cited the company's global messaging service, WhatsApp, as a model. And WhatsApp user data. Oh, sorry. Let me go ahead and read this. And it turns out, before we start reading this article, that there's already a couple of really interesting tweets related to this, because, as one person says, how it works essentially is that if two users are talking on WhatsApp and one of the users reports bad activity, that's when it gets sent to these human moderators. And what they receive is the past 5 messages. And this is somebody named Tanya Riley tweeted out that WhatsApp user data, ProPublica has learned, helped prosecutors build a high-profile case against a Treasury Department employee who leaked confidential documents to BuzzFeed News that exposed how dirty money flows through U.S. banks. And they were able to do this only because, apparently, somebody flagged a conversation, and that allowed the human moderators, which are contractors, to review the encrypted conversation. So the article says how Facebook undermines privacy protections for its 2 billion WhatsApp users. WhatsApp assures users that no one can see their messages, but the company has extensive monitoring operation and regularly shares personal information with prosecutors. Boy, doesn't this sound like the last headline about Proton Mail. When Mark Zuckerberg unveiled a new privacy-focused vision for Facebook in 2019, he cited the company's global messaging service WhatsApp as a model, acknowledging that we don't currently have a strong reputation for building privacy protective services. I believe the future of communication will increasingly shift to private encrypted services where people can be confident that what they say to each other stays secure and their messages and content won't stick around forever. This is the future I hope we will help bring about. We plan to build this the way we developed WhatsApp. Zuckerberg's vision centered on WhatsApp's signature feature, which he said the company was planning to apply to Instagram and Facebook Messenger, which is end-to-end encryption, which converts all messages into unreadable format that is only unlocked when they reach their intended destinations. WhatsApp messages are so secure, he said, that nobody else, not even the company, can read a word. As Zuckerberg had put it earlier in testimony to the U.S. Senate 2018, we don't see any of the contents in WhatsApp. WhatsApp emphasizes this point so consistently that a flag with a similar assurance automatically appears on screen before users send messages. No one outside of this chat, not even WhatsApp, can read or listen to this message. Those assurances are not true. WhatsApp has more than 1,000 contract workers filing floors of office buildings in Austin, Texas, Dublin, and Singapore, where they examine millions of pieces of user content. Seated at computers in pods organized by work assignments, these hourly workers use special Facebook software to sift through streams of private messages, images, and videos that have been reported by WhatsApp users as improper, and then screened by the company's AI systems. Then contractors pass judgment on whether flashes on their screen claims of everything from fraud or spam to child porn and potential terrorist plotting, and they do this typically in less than a minute. Policing users while assuring them that their privacy is sacrosanct makes for an awkward mission at WhatsApp. A 49-slide internal company marketing presentation from December obtained by ProPublica emphasizes the fierce promotion of WhatsApp privacy narrative. It compares its brand character to the immigrant mother and displays a photo of Malala Yousafzai, who survived shooting by the Taliban and became a Nobel Prize winner. In a slide titled Brand Tone Parameters, the presentation does not mention the company's content moderation efforts. And WhatsApp's director of communications, Carl Woog, acknowledged the team's contractors in Austin and elsewhere review WhatsApp messages to identify and remove the worst abusers. But Woog told ProPublica that the company does not consider this work to be content moderation, saying we actually don't typically use the term for WhatsApp. The company declined to make an executive available for interview for this article, but responded to questions with written comments. WhatsApp is a lifeline for millions of people around the world, the company said. The decisions we make around how we build our app are focused around the privacy of our users, maintaining a high degree of reliability and preventing abuse. So the question,
Tyler, you
yes.
remember we discussed Pegasus a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
If you had the Pegasus crap on your computer or phone rather, then they could read all the Proton mails, and they could actually authenticate and add other devices to your Proton mail account as well, together with reading and forwarding all your WhatsApp and Telegram and Signal messages as well. You undone.
So I think an interesting question is, I mean, now that this is known, people will likely leave WhatsApp to some degree. Although the question for the people on stage is, how do you feel about WhatsApp doing this particular use case, where shouldn't end-to-end encryption conversations, shouldn't you as a user of an end-to-end encrypted app, part of the cost of using that is the knowledge that you might be sent content that you don't like, or that you feel is offensive, or that you wish somebody could flag. I mean, you can't moderate, you can't truly end-to-end, truly private end-to-end encrypted conversations. The whole point of that is only you can see it, so you shouldn't be able to you should know, okay, I'm using an app that I know there's no recourse to get somebody in trouble unless you took screenshots and then went to a police station and said, hey, look what this idiot sent me. This is against the law, go take care of it. But shouldn't you, if you're using Proton Mail or any end-to-end encrypted technology, shouldn't you as a user take responsibility or assume or maybe not assume that the platform should have any responsibility for what you're exposed to if you're agreeing to use their end-to-end encrypted technology?
Well, I think it depends on the process, right? Like if they're doing it based on the report feature, it's almost like forwarding a message or something, right? So if are they able to see all the messages, everything, or is it just
The
you hit the
last
report?
5. It says the last 5.
So, Tyler,
Yes.
from me, I mean, listen, from a technology perspective,
Yeah.
it's PKI, right? It's public key infrastructure, right? And public-private key infrastructure, you can have delegated authority. And what they're saying here is at a certain point, we can delegate the private key back to a certified authority, in this case, be it the 1,000 members, and they can review a certain domain. So everything is end-to-end encrypted, nothing is intercepted, and it's about, and anybody who wants to do PKI, honestly, Wikipedia, PKI, have a look at it. It's all diagrammed there and explained there quite well. And I think they're just using that infrastructure to say it is end-to-end, but we also have a process to help, the world. And so from that perspective, they're using the technology for what they see as a benefit rather than a snoop. And that's technologically. For me personally, and from a societal perspective, nothing's secure. Nothing is secure. Like if I want to tell somebody a secret, I'll go and whisper it in your ear in real life. I will walk over to you and say, this is my secret. Okay? That's
Yeah.
the most secure I can make it. Otherwise, like, why think about having secrets? There's no secrets.
Yeah, I think geeks like ourselves who understand these things intentionally adopt that behavior of, if I really feel the need to have plausible deniability, I'm going to actually insist on meeting in person and maybe even leave the phones behind, or maybe go into a very loud environment where the phones microphones would be useless. I feel like I'm not unique as a geek, and I think, Johan, you would agree that this is just kind of the hygiene of communications in in our era.
Yeah, one of the things I actually was pondering about how I should bring up is about, are you sure that the friend you're going over to and whisper in his ear, he doesn't have an earbud there or a phone in his pocket that actually can record what you say anyway? So you're screwed now, however you do.
You are, Johan, and to a point where I kind of think, like, whoever has that kind of secret that shouldn't be known anyway, like, you're dealing in some dark shit, right? You're dealing in some stuff that isn't right anyway. I mean, I
Not
live my life
not
very open and
necessarily.
transparent.
There's
Go on,
often
go on,
there's
Tyler.
there's
Give
off
me another.
there's oftentimes needs to be very private. Like, for example, you're in a romantic relationship, and it's not you're not necessarily doing anything bad. You believe something really bad is being done to you, and you want to employ friends for help, or and you have to tread very lightly, and you want to make sure that the person who's doing something bad to you doesn't find out that you know.
I can
Okay. So,
say,
sorry,
so
just on that point, if I may, sorry, I hear you, Tyler, I hear you. But in that sense, if a certified authority, Facebook, WhatsApp in this case, if they got to know about that secret, so what? You won't exactly care. That's my point. Like, if it's a secret that you don't mind a certified authority that are checking on the public domain
Mm.
have found out about,
Oh,
as
I see
long as
what you
it's
mean.
not your, yeah. So
Yeah,
it's. I think it depends on the context of the secret here.
right.
there's
So,
there are times when there's a really very thin line, for instance, between who is a freedom fighter, right, and who is a terrorist. And I can say that, being in the
boy,
field,
boy, that
fighting
that that that, that
apartheid.
that's never been more true than in Afghanistan at this very moment. Because
Absolutely.
now that the Taliban's in charge, what is the Taliban going to tell Facebook? Oh, Facebook, oh, or Proton Mail. Hey, go ahead and crack open this email server for us, would you please? We'd like to see what the previous government was recording on there. It's like, well, they're now the government. Are you not going to play ball with that government? Well, no, you're not, because you'll happily walk away from the very minuscule market opportunity known as Afghanistan, because there's not a lot of money to be made there. India, on the other hand, there's nothing a tech company wouldn't do now in India. So that's been the precedence of that has been made rather clear. But yeah, governments are complying. I mean, big tech is complying with governments depending on size. They're really eager to please Mr. Modi in India, and Vladimir Putin's making some interesting demands, and so far they're not complying with the Kremlin, and nor would they comply with the Taliban. And in fact, Google is now saying that they've gone ahead and shut down all of the Google services that the previous Afghani government was using, so that the Taliban can't get their hands on that data and those email addresses and names and Google Sheets and all of that stuff, and use it as in a retaliatory manner to hunt down, accomplices of the previous regime. So this is a case of tech not being friendly to the quote unquote new government in Afghanistan. Sorry to go take it off target, but in WhatsApp's case, isn't it a little peculiar? I mean, if what you want is end-to-end encryption as why you're using that product, should you also feel you also want to be able to alert the platform of some kind of abuse of some kind? I would assume no. I'm using an end-to-end encryption platform. There's no recourse if I feel like there's some kind of abuse going on.
Yeah, if I may, the thing is here, since I work with the dark side of the internet here, and every time somebody brings up that, he asked to get contacted by WhatsApp, I say, but then you're screwed, because then you're on your own. If you choose to leave the standard communication platforms and use an end-to-end encrypted platform, we will have very hard to get real evidence who was behind it. And getting the data out of Facebook, we have always seen, even from the governmental point and the police in Sweden, we have seen this as impossible, because all inquiries has gone dead silent. They have never, ever answered us regarding WhatsApp information for the cases I've been involved. The cases I've been involved have been romance scams and investment frauds. So yeah, it's okay. They have a solution. Okay, fine. Why couldn't we use it?
And that's why it has taken over 2 years for Interpol to get governments to begin to start looking at how it can actually make organizations now comply with child pornography images. So they are forcing the providers to actually take active steps to prevent the commission. In effect, these images are being traded sometimes for a huge amount of money, and there are criminals making quite a lot of money out of child pornography images. The question is, if these organizations are facilitating their trade by providing the secrecy and the privacy from means that they could hide from the authorities, then they are essentially acting as pimps. So there's and that is why now some Apple and Amazon are beginning to say no. If you are using our service and our storage facilities to store your illicit material, then we're going to make that available, or we're going to scan for it.
Okay, so one more thought on this one is, now that it's been revealed that Facebook has 1,000 contractors moderating WhatsApp kind of alerts and whatnot, okay, clearly they themselves didn't reveal this. ProPublica revealed this, a journalist, and now the word is out. And let's see what what people are saying on Twitter. It says ProPublica claims WhatsApp moderators in Dublin and others sometimes look at flagged messages despite as the article says, like 20 paragraph. If a user receives a message they think violates the rules, they press the report button, which tells them it will submit the most recent messages from the chat for review. This is like saying messages aren't encrypted if the recipient can screenshot them or copy them and paste them. WhatsApp assures users that no one can see their messages, but the company has an extensive monitoring operation. What I'm looking at is the comments on Twitter about this article for the amount of surprise or just trying to measure just how disturbed people are by this revelation. And I have to say, they're not that disturbed. They're not that upset. Meaning, Facebook was probably correct not to warn people in advance, which they could have done. They could have said, you know what? We're end-to-end encrypted. However, we also allow you to flag stuff. And when you flag stuff, this happens and it's great. And here's why you'll love it. So it's end-to-end encrypted. Plus, you can, you have the best of both. You don't get abused. And if you do get abused, there's recourse. And isn't this lovely? It's fantastic. We love it. We think you will too. Enjoy. They didn't do that. They just said it's end-to-end encrypted, end of story. And now this has been found out. And how are people responding? And generally, they're responding in a way that indicates they're not really that upset. And honestly, I don't think they should be. My point is Apple also had this decision recently where they're going to start scanning your iCloud images for child abuse images. And they must have debated for a minute, should we make this known or not? And if we do, well, they did. They decided to, because, well, if they didn't let it be known publicly that they were doing this, it might be a very long time before somebody found out. But the problem is once they find out,
they will then have a duty to inform.
Maybe
they will. If Apple saw it on their servers, they have a duty to inform. If they didn't inform, then they would have been caught in the.
What I'm saying is how they communicate it to the public and their users about the fact that they are doing this, because they could have decided, you know what, let's not tell users we're scanning for this content, and they'll probably never find out. And if they do, we'll be able to explain it. But they didn't do that. They decided to say, hey, you know what, everybody, we're going to be scanning for this content. And what's particularly interesting is chronologically, Apple said, you know what, we decided we're gonna let people know. They told everybody, hey, everybody, we're gonna scan your iCloud images for child abuse imagery. They got huge pushback, so much pushback that they said, okay, sorry, we're gonna go back to the drawing board and have a little plan B and rethink this. So never mind, we're not going to do it after all. So the huge blowback. However, before they announced that, and that was only 48 hours ago that they announced that, 4 or 5 days ago they announced, oh, by the way, everyone who's so angry at the idea that we would do this, we've already been doing this in your Apple Mail since 2019. That was a headline. We're already scanning your email for child abuse images. Oh, and we never told you. So why are you pretending to be so upset now? And maybe we should have just never told you because we didn't tell you about your email, but we are telling you now. Really quite interesting thoughts there. Okay, so the next...
It's just quick.
I mean, the most important thing about this, Tyler, is that, it is not broader than child abuse and a very limited case use, right? It doesn't affect your other privacy rights. So, you can still continue to enjoy all the privacy rights elsewhere. It is only limited to this particular area around child abuse and terrorism.
So when Americans are worried, and I don't blame them for thinking that this use case of child abuse will expand into whatever else the government wants to force Apple to do through this back door. And that's what Snowden keeps ranting on about on his tweets. If you check out @Snowden on Twitter, he even took to YouTube to make a 45-minute video kind of pleading with everybody to understand how this is the beginnings of the end, where big tech is getting in bed with the government. And it's very similar to what's happening in China. Now China controls all the data, and he believes the same scenarios unfolding in the US. It's similar but different in how it's materializing. So,
can I quickly make a point,
sure,
Tyler, on
Carl,
this?
go ahead.
Just to go back on what Aaron was saying is that I think it depends on your expectations of what platform that you're discussing. I think I think Facebook has been such a privacy mess for so long that people are kind of expecting it now. You were saying that, oh, well, you're going into the comments and nobody seems surprised and nobody seems to care. I think that's because a lot of people using Facebook are aware of basically they just expect it now. They're tracking everything now, even if they're not looking at your messages. They've got the IP addresses of everyone you're talking to. They know where you're logging in. They know if you walk past like a McDonald's or whatnot. They know if you go in, and then so it's expected. But with Apple, it's you expect it to have some sort of privacy. It's the same as if I stand in the middle of a busy street and scream the PIN to my debit card. I'm not going to be surprised if somebody then hears and remembers the PIN to my debit card. If I whisper it into somebody's ear and then some stranger I don't know knows it, I'm going to be obviously put out and not really understand why and be concerned about my privacy. So I think it's expectations. It's this weird situation where Facebook has done this so badly for so long, they might actually be coming out the other side, which is terrifying.
Hey, Johan, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still
Hey,
Can you check the hand raise?
Okaidi Nasai, yeah. Check sta.
we in the back channel we have actually been having an APB for our girls, and now we've found one of them at least.
I said I'm back.
Yeah. So, Johan, you being Swedish, you obviously know that your home address is easily discoverable by everybody in Sweden, and your cell phone number, and even your salary. And that being the case, does that make you less likely to be to say certain things or to get into an argument or to upset somebody in public, for example? Like if you're on a bus and rather than have a fight with somebody on the bus about stealing your seat or fighting for the armrest on a flight, does the fact that that your personal details are publicly searchable give you second thoughts about engaging with people in a heated way?
Absolutely not. And the thing is that what is also publicly available is the car registration register. So if you get into let's call it an angry situation in the traffic, and you actually want to look up the perpetrator, it's very, very easy. You send an SMS and you actually get the mobile phone number to him. You get his address, his name, which year he is born, etc. You get all that information just by giving the car's registration number. And the thing is
Holy
here
crap.
that Swedes we're quite open. We are not anywhere like the American way where our IRS reports or the yearly tax that's available for anyone. I can actually go back and ask for Tyler's tax, which he had in 1998. That's still available in the system. Everything. How much did he earn? How much did he do in taxes? How much was his discounts for the different things? Everything is available free for anyone to go into the tax office and ask for. So, and the thing is here, this with the cancel culture that have hit Sweden over the last few years now is really starting to take its toll. Because nowadays, actually, journalists look up other journalists and go to their bosses, as well as they go to influencers, and through the tax report, they find who they are employed of and contact their employer and get them sacked. Actually, we have a case today. We have a very, very popular Swedish right-wing podcast named Sista Måltiden. We're one of these guys that are speaking quite fun and quite frequently and freely was sacked from the project where he was working because he was part of the pod and some of the Vokes didn't like it anymore. Johan Dunn.
Okay, next article is from Bloomberg. I was just, before I go into the next article, I was just thinking about how young people today might do what Carl was, or somebody else was implying, which is I think geeks generally operate with the mentality that everything, you have no privacy at all. And I wonder to what degree that's affecting people's public behaviors, especially younger folks who probably, like geeks, just resigned to the fact that there is no digital privacy of any kind, and what kind of impact
Can
that's going to
I
have on society when everyone operates with the knowledge that everything they're doing could be on the cover of the New York Times tomorrow. Yeah,
Can I comment on that
sure.
quickly? Like, just with the way that I see young people that I mentor and stuff, even use Snapchat, they have like it's much more use like a phone number more than anything else. So they'll be very private with handing out their Snapchat, but you can have their Instagram, and the Instagram's quite kind of like the general area where everything is open, but it can still be a private page if you understand me. So, and then when I see their functionality and use of Twitter, it's like they don't have their name up, they don't have anything that's governmental, and they believe, at least from what I've noticed, that everything is private. Like they can have a fake name, a fake page, a fan page more so than anything else that I've seen. And like they talk about their fandom and they move from like BTS to like Why Don't We and all of these other pop bands that they like, and then they kind of discard that page, and then when they want to go into a quote unquote new era, then they make a new page, or they just evolve with that Twitter page and change their handle and all sorts. So like there is this kind of growth and distinction between how certain people want to use their particular pages, especially with the certain functionalities. But more so than anything else, Snapchat is the more, how would you say, private one. It generally is like asking for someone's phone number. I've seen like just when I speak to like 20 somethings, like in early 20s, and like teenagers as well.
If I may, Tyler,
Yep.
this comes down to not just from the technological side of it, but from the actual humane side of it. This comes down to trust. Okay, I think where Carl was going earlier on about telling the secret into someone's ear, like I was mentioning, some of the young people that have been born digitally native have been born with platforms that they've trusted, and you see Apple building a closed ecosystem around trust. In our days, and this isn't an ageist thing. In our days, we would have seen banks as a trusted entity. People grew up in some places trusting governments. It all comes down to that relationship with the platform or the entity of trust. And I think what we're seeing with these younger generations is they have multiple platforms for multiple identities. And if it's governmental identity, which is where the data resides, if it's financial identity and where the data resides, I think they have different trust relationships going on with those platforms.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's also a need to differentiate between surveillance from state entities and private actors. I know there's been some polling that Americans are super suspicious of any government surveillance, but really don't care as much about private companies like Google trying to sell them more crap. So, certainly I think there's a need to distinguish between those two as well.
Aaron hit it right on the head in that the fact that it's I think as geeks we tend to look at privacy as this holy thing that in all aspects needs to be revered, and it should absolutely. But in the sense of, our financials fine and our messages are fine, but we're being tracked locationally, or our emails are under sort of surveillance or anything like that. It's like any kind of privacy invasion sort of rubs us up the wrong way because we're technologically literate and with that generation where we're thinking about these things now. But I think a lot of people, it's just like, my message is being read, and that's it. It's like, but they're tracking you for ads. I don't care as long as they're not seeing, my messages. And there's no greater sort of satirical evidence of this is a really good John Oliver skit where he goes out into the public in New York, I believe, and he's walking around. He's saying, look, if you send your messages on this platform, they can see your messages. And they're like, yeah, I don't really care. Or they can see who you're talking to. I don't care. And then he goes around and says, well, okay, if you send a message on this platform at this time, they can see your dick pics. And all of a sudden people cared. And everybody then cared, because it's not just a case of, is my privacy being violated? It's what is being violated. And I think that's the difference of people in the tech world and people that are trying to live their everyday lives
Yeah.
and afford milk.
I just want to add, like, just with women as well that get sent gross pictures and stuff like that. Like, these social media sites don't necessarily do much about that, but they're going to enact this sweep of, iCloud and Facebook messages, WhatsApp, I should say. I mean, but yeah, they're basically the same company. But the reality is that on the day-to-day basis, the women that get harassed, I guess, in this online way, it doesn't seem like they care much about one or the other. It's more so, I can't even explain the behavior, to be fair.
By the way,
Tyler, I pinged in Emma. She has a first-hand experience on the baddest way that's possible of this one. Let's see if she joins.
okay, I'd tell her to raise her hand. Emma, if you can hear me, please raise your hand. And while we try and connect with Emma on the dick pic issue, I'm hoping somebody go through with the fantastic idea we had here a month or so ago of allowing, very similar to this WhatsApp example, where if somebody sends some kind of abuse through a chat app, that there was a really there's another app which you could then share the infringing content to. So if you receive a dick pic from somebody, you could forward it to a new app called DickyLeaks, and it would then post that photo and name and shame that individual, and then that individual would then have to pay to have that content removed, and that money would be split with the person who submitted the content, with the victim.
That sounds like OnlyFans, but with more steps.
We actually have a Swedish influencer that did just that. She took all the dick pictures with the phone numbers they were coming in by SMS and everything, and posted it. And she did get beaten very, very badly by many, but not by all. There were quite many that actually flamed the bastards that actually sent them, because she published everything. The numbers, the names, if they were in a phone book X's for X on the beach, more or less. So, and one of the things here that I find most interesting is that, okay, our friends on Facebook and Twitter, they can find a nipple on 200 meters, but they can't find a dick picture that almost covered the page to block it. How fucking hard can it be, literally?
Okay, so I didn't see, did Emma join? No? Maybe we'll wait.
No.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay. So we'll go to the next one. If she comes in, just let me know. The next one up is from Bloomberg, and it says that the former Sony PlayStation boss named Sean Layden reveals he left Sony PlayStation due to burnout, and says the industry has a sustainability problem due to rising game development costs. And in the article, he says, for example, that game development seems to double in cost every platform, meaning like when you go from generation to generation, like from PlayStation 3 to 4 to 5. He says, noting that his budget for recent big PlayStation 4 titles each hit $100 million each. If we can't stop the cost curve from going up, all we can do is try to de-risk it. That puts you in a place where you're incentivized towards sequels. He predicts that PS5 games will cost $200 million to make each, and that the cost will continue to grow exponentially from there. I had no idea it was $100 million to make a PS4 game for Sony, and that PS5 games are expected to be $200 million each. Jesus Christ. Although it makes sense because they're making mountains of money in return. So I don't know that this is actually a quote-unquote real problem. Just like Hollywood movies, the more, the blockbuster movies also cost about $100 million, and they make a lot more than the movies that cost, $50 million to make. So the more you invest, the higher the potential return. So, like I said, I don't know that this is actually.
It's worth stating that just like the mobile phone industry, most of that is advertising and PR, and that can.
Yeah. So, anyway, interesting article that I just tweeted out. And then the next one up is from the New York Times. It says, a look at the Freedom Phone, a $500 device aimed at right-wing users and created by a 22-year-old Bitcoin millionaire who admitted it was made by China's Umidigi. And the 22-year-old Bitcoin millionaire wants Republicans to ditch their iPhones for a low-end handset that he hopes to turn into a political tool. And boy, and by the way, this listing of articles is a mix of algorithm and curation, generally almost all algorithm. And it's interesting that the first one was the El Salvador Bitcoin. That makes perfect sense. The second one was about Proton Mail and how it's supposed to be end-to-end encrypted, and it, some people got in trouble. The third one was about WhatsApp, which is a privacy issue about end-to-end encryption, which wasn't. And now we're on the hardware part with the Freedom Phone, which is all about privacy. So 3 of the top 6 articles were all fundamentally about user privacy. And that's, in a way, not a coincidence. It speaks to just how big of an issue this is becoming right now in, September of 2021. Like, people are really starting to wake up. The fact that this really is being targeted to end users and citizens who a year ago had no freaking clue what end-to-end encryption was and had no real clue about how privacy was or wasn't working on the internet at all.
And the question is it going to actually make a difference, or is it going to go the same way as environment and recycling and everything else, where the tactic is to desensitize people to the concept, so they just go, I don't fucking care anymore. It's too complicated. I don't know who to believe. I don't care anymore. I'm just going to keep with Facebook.
Great question.
That's the question.
So will we then see misinformation campaigns saying that the Freedom Phone is actually a tool of the CCP? Because that's kind of what you're pointing to is some really bizarre, sinister implications that this thing is not what it's the conspiracies run amok, and Putin or Uncle Xi is using this phone and blah blah blah, and will it implode on itself? So it says it was a pitch tuned for a politically polarized audience. Eric Finman, a 22-year-old who called himself the world's youngest Bitcoin millionaire, posted a video on Twitter for a new kind of smartphone that he said would liberate Americans from their big tech overlords. And boy, is that not the common thread in these previous stories, because Proton Mail is precisely targeting and positioning itself as an alternative to big tech email, right? We can agree on that. That's why Proton Mail exists, because people are losing trust in big tech fundamentally. And then the second article about WhatsApp also is about losing trust in big tech, in this case in Facebook. This third article about this phone is also about losing trust in big tech. That's really interesting. And this is not governments losing trust in big tech. This are 3 articles out of the top 6 articles today are about lay people, users, starting to have second thoughts about trusting big tech, which is quite interesting in and of itself. So it says
is it also not only losing trust in big tech and this collusion with government, but it's the other thing. Is it that they cannot? There are a certain segment of the population that don't want to be accountable. Accountable to government, accountable to the banks, accountable to
here we go.
civil society, and all of those kinds of things, and that is what they want. That lack of accountability. Bitcoin is exactly that. Proton Mail is exactly that. This idea that they can do whatever they want without accountability.
Let's get ready to rumble, Sylvan. Because
check the hand raise, Tyler.
Say what?
Check the hand raise. Lakeisha,
check the hand raise.
Right?
Okay. Welcome back, Lakeisha. And so I think you're exactly right. Actually, I don't actually want to rumble with you. I think it's a fantastic point, which is in this case, the far right, quote unquote, feels like big tech is getting in bed with the Democrats and big tech, and in a way, and the big tech is anti-Republican, and they're silencing them and deplatforming them in some way that's related to Donald Trump being kicked off of the social networks, and now they don't trust big tech, and but simultaneously, the as I've said multiple times in recent episodes of Tech News Around the World, as Balaji was saying in his podcast with Sam Harris, there certainly seems to be indication that big tech is about to do a bizarre kind of back end merger with the government in terms of data and privacy. And that's what, and Apple and Amazon both announcing that they're going to be, looking at on their platforms for infringing content, and that these are the breadcrumbs that seem to indicate where this is all going. So I can understand why the far right is understandably worried, because what if they actually are coordinating to try and resist what they feel is, a government that is working against them? It's a really interesting point. So it says in this article, in the splashy video posted in July, which with stirring music, American flags, and references to Abraham Lincoln and Donald Trump, conservative pundits hawked Mr. Finman's Freedom Phone, and his video amassed 1.8 million views. Mr. Finman soon had thousands of orders for the $500 device. Then came the hard part, building and delivering the phones. First, he received bad early reviews for a plan to simply put his software on a cheap Chinese phone. And then there was the unglamorous work of shipping the phones, hiring customer service agents, collecting sales taxes, and dealing with regulators. I feel like practically I was prepared for anything, he said in a recent interview. But I guess it's kind of like how you hope for world peace, in the sense you don't think it's going to happen. For even the most lavishly funded startups, it's hard to compete with tech industry giants that have a death grip on their markets and are valued in the trillions of dollars. Mr. Finman was part of a growing right-wing tech industry taking on the challenge, nevertheless, relying more on their conservative customers' distaste for Silicon Valley than expertise or experience. There are cloud providers hosting right-wing websites, a so-called free speech video site competing with YouTube, and at least 7 conservative social networks trying to compete with Facebook. Parler, the right-wing social network funded by conservative mega donor Rebecca Mercer, found itself fighting for its life earlier this year after Apple and Amazon pulled their services. Another social media company popular with the far right called Gab has fought to gain traction without a place on the Apple or Google app stores, and Getter, a social network created by veterans of the Trump administration, was immediately hacked. Mr. Finman, who has bleach blonde hair and brown chin-strap beard, calls himself an agent of change for both tech and Republican politics. In a freewheeling interview over lamb kebabs at a Turkish restaurant in Manhattan, Mr. Finman weighed in on the British politics and why he thought the modern Republican Party was pathetic. The party's leaders complain about big tech censorship, he said, but do little about it. Well, it's because they're gonna get access to they're gonna get everything they want out of big tech. They don't have to crack down on them. They're just gonna sneak up in them. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. But I think the interesting point is how these dots connect in an unintuitive way. But so far, the Republican specific platforms, be they social media platforms or even devices like this, don't really seem to have a huge market opportunity like they thought they had. Because you think that the Republicans would be 50% of all voters, roughly. And so that means, 100 million potential users of a platform or a device. It just doesn't seem to translate that way. So the next big article is from the New York Times. They say they've done analysis that mining Bitcoin uses 91 terawatt hours of electricity annually, which is about half of 1% of all electricity consumed globally, or about 7 times Google's total usage, and grew 10 times or 10x in the past 5 years. The next one up is from TechCrunch. It says the U.S. and Senegal-based Wave, which offers mobile money services, raises $200 million at a $1.7 billion valuation, led by Sequoia. And there you go, another unicorn. If we count it as a Senegal company, then you have another African fintech unicorn. So it seems like every other week at this point. The next article is from the Wall Street Journal that China's mega tech company JD says now that their founder and CEO, Richard Liu, will step back from day-to-day operations to focus on long-term strategy. And that's now 4 of China's biggest tech CEOs have all stepped down since Jack Ma was kind of forced down. And then TikTok's co-founder, and then Pinduoduo, and now JD. And these really are the biggest tech companies in all of China, and aside from the US, the biggest in the world, and pretty much on par with Google and Facebook and Apple and Amazon. So imagine if Amazon, Google, Facebook, if the CEOs were all to step down and over the course of 5 or 6 months. That's what's happening in China. So quite an interesting development indeed. The next one up is from CNBC, which is America's leading finance TV network, essentially. And they say they are doing a deep dive on Amazon Web Services about their margins and all of their different services, and the fact that it is now making up over half of Amazon's profits since 2014. And it is a wildly profitable business for them, the Amazon cloud hosting. And they currently do about 40% of all of the internet is hosted on Amazon, by the way. The next one up is from the Wall Street Journal. Researchers are developing smart toilets that can scan urine and feces samples for health data using cameras and machine learning, raising privacy concerns. Ladies and gentlemen, did we not predict this was coming? Like 4 months ago. We joked about it, but we joked knowing that it was coming.
Yes.
Cheryl, you can confirm?
Yep.
And I believe it was my own joke and prediction that this was in the near future going to happen, because that there isn't. And I remember making the point now that my mouth is recollecting. I remember making the comment that when you go to a doctor, you do blood tests. When you go to the doctor, you explain what's wrong with you, and then the doctor says, okay, you need to go to the lab and either take a blood test or a urine test or a stool test or a saliva test. I mean, what else is there? You could do x-rays, you could do scans, but generally when you go to the hospital, doing scans is quite expensive. Doing CT scans, MRI scans, even x-rays, there's costs with that. Doing urine samples and stool samples and blood tests, actually those are really cheap. And the idea was we were reading about how a lot of blood tests might be able to happen more or less in home. And by the way, why couldn't you develop a smart toilet to not only do fecal and urine samples, but on a very regular basis and give you the data? And boy, how many potential illnesses and diseases would you be able to detect very, very early if you were to have such a toilet in your house? Hey, Heyman, are you joining? Are you with us? I'm curious.
I think he's in a Zoom meeting now.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can answer also this, Danish.
Oh, say Danish. Sorry, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
John is in the audience too, by the way.
Okay.
John Madison.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so 100%, you're absolutely right. Everything you said was correct. I mean, we're working on it right now. There's a company called Genioscopy
Mark my words, they're going to go public in 2 years max. Started by a brother-sister pair. They literally now, and this is to your point, everybody's been talking about Cologuard, which is a company that takes your stool, which, by the way, if you're a GI doctor right now, a doctor that does colonoscopies, you're shaking in your boots right now because colonoscopies are done on pretty much most Americans that are actually compliant. Uh, but it's been replaced quite significantly, or at least the first sort of screening colonoscopy has been disintermediated by a stool test. Maybe you've seen it in the mail, things like that. And one of the biggest issues with it, for example, to your point, Tyler, was that it could detect cancer once it was there, just like a colonoscopy. And guess what happened? This company called Genioscopy comes out of nowhere, and they're saying we can actually detect precancerous lesions. So you're going to see this happen over and over.
Thank God.
If you remember, Mahogany brought another story from MIT Review, that talked about urine testing and not only being able to detect cancer, but detect where that cancer was from. I don't know if you remember that story about nanoparticles and how they're working on that at MIT and commercializing it. So we're probably 3 to 4 years from the point where this becomes a reality. I do think that uh, toilet seat side testing still needs some time, but maybe I'm wrong. Everything is happening so much faster, and I think we're gonna see this happen. There's another thing here that I wanted to bring up, which is automation of lab sample testing is a reality right now. So like across the US, most giant labs actually have robots that are doing a lot of the lab testing. And so it does, as robots get miniaturized, and Jean Francois and I talk about this all the time, a lot of these things that happen in big, big spaces and big labs are now going to start happening smaller and smaller, and will get closer and closer to the home. So I don't think we're that far away, but I do think that that is the barrier. It's not the collection of the sample, it's the execution of the lab tests right there at the toilet side, I guess.
Is this also applicable for women? Because I know in the UK, thankfully it's a free procedure, but regularly women after a certain age have to undergo smear tests, which is relatively simple and quick, but it's quite invasive and uncomfortable for a lot of women. So is there something is this technology applicable to that? Is there something in the works to sort of replace that need to go to a GP and undergo that experience?
John, I don't know of any, but I know HPV testing specifically, there's a lot of people working on that. But I don't know if actual being able to be as definitive as a pap smear in terms of cervical cancer screening, if there is
You,
actual urine test yet. I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah,
if you have one of those Toto smart toilets, which I do, you can very easily see, a few more sensors added on and the ability to do all this stuff. I mean, it's really not that, it doesn't seem that far away to me because I bought this smart toilet last year during the toilet paper shortage caused by the pandemic. I'm laughing when I'm saying it, but it wasn't funny. It was a real smart purchase for me. And I don't see why I couldn't have things collected, at least urine and stool collected from my toilet and analyzed.
yeah. This is John. I got to jump on a call in 2 minutes, but briefly, right now it's aside from Cologuard, these are mostly science projects. But the rate of progress in finding the right markers that are inexpensive to detect, that have high sensitivity and high specificity, whether it's for HPV or for abnormal vaginal cells that are precancerous, or abnormal colon cells that are precancerous, or indicators from the microbiome itself. So already there's a marker. It's a dimer of linoleic acid that is a good proxy for the health of your microbiome as a whole. So there's opportunities for sequencing the humans, detecting precancerous lesions, detecting dysbiosis, that is, abnormalities of the microbiome, which are highly associated with innumerable diseases already. So really, the science project of finding what inexpensive, highly sensitive, highly specific markers is going at a blazing pace. And I agree with Danish that within a couple of years we will know what those markers are. Until then, there's going to be a lot of snake oil being sold in this space because people will prematurely try and claim the market. Someone needs to go on mute. But this is going to be an explosive, no pun intended, explosive field in the future.
I've used Cologuard since the very beginning. I read about it because I do a lot of healthcare marketing and mentoring, and I had a colonoscopy at age 50 whenever you're supposed to get one, and it turned out that I didn't have polyps. And so that's what Cologuard said is the signal that you can use it instead of using a colonoscopy. And as soon as it came out, I adopted it and I'm still using it. And
So
I'm still here.
the article says researchers and companies are developing high-tech toilets that go beyond adding smart speakers. All of the things that have come with smart watches and phones, you can imagine that on another scale. You could really start to understand disease risk. Doctors have long used fecal and urine samples for clues to people's health, but there has been a renewed interest in recent years as scientists have begun to better understand how the microbes in our gut influence our well-being, and even COVID in stool samples, for example. Some researchers want to harness the wealth of information on the individual level and have come up with models to peer into the toilet bowl remotely. Some smart toilets are geared towards helping doctors monitor patients with chronic conditions or heightened risk for certain diseases, whereas other companies aim to sell the toilets with price tags in the hundreds of thousands of dollars directly to consumers as a tool to track and improve their own health and wellness. Researchers at Stanford School of Medicine have outfitted a toilet with cameras and trained a machine learning algorithm to analyze the waste against a diagnostic chart. The toilet can also track the flow, color, and volume of urine. It is equipped with a urine test strip similar to a pregnancy test that can detect specific molecules that can provide insight into a person's health. To tell users apart, the toilet has both fingerprint scan when a person flushes and a scan of their anus's characteristics, or an anal print.
I do feel bad for that AI. That is really.
Do you just love the fact that we exist at a time in history that this may never happen again, where simultaneously around the world we have thousands of people petitioning against the fact that, like, Facebook might see a message about buying cat food, while also anal cams are commercially viable conception for companies, and sampling my stool, in real time is also perfectly viable as a commercial product. Like, those two things shouldn't exist at the same time in history.
Imagine if you connect this with the eye scanner we discussed a couple of months ago. Then you have all free eyes.
You can tell how wide my eyes are going as I'm taking a shit.
It was only a fecal matter of time. It says the Stanford team has signed an agreement with Aizen, a Korean toilet maker, to manufacture the toilet. They hope to have working prototypes that can be used in clinical trials by the end of this year, says the person who leads the project and the former chair of radiology at Stanford. Another prototype smart toilet developed by Duke University also deploys cameras and machine learning to analyze waste after it's been flushed. It uses other sensors to capture consistency, presence of blood, and specific proteins, and extracts a small vial of stool that can be shipped off to a lab for further analysis. The smart toilet, along with others in development, is designed to connect with an app on a person's phone. And then this really once you start talking about the apps, boy, oh boy, will Amazon get into the smart toilet game, or start putting in smart toilets in their HQs, for example, where then they can now know that their employees, because once Amazon's getting into the health insurance game, no doubt, and they might want to know if their employees need, by the way, you could potentially change the monthly cost of your health insurance based on the health of your urine and stool samples.
This is
Your
so one thing I
insurance
didn't
premium can
realize.
go up month to month.
Right.
Yeah, Tyler, one thing I didn't realize is that it could actually collect the sample and ship it. I mean, that's now suddenly it seems much more realistic in the short term, right? I mean, so people don't know this, but even what Dr. Francine was saying, even with Cologuard, we actually have compliance issues. I mean, people are not even willing to take their stool and send it out just so we can tell them whether they have cancer or not. And if it can be done automatically and passively, perhaps we'll see even better compliance with even things like Cologuard and Genioscopy and others. I mean, that would be huge. That would mean that essentially we could have it so that instead of one of the challenges that we've had is that we've been doing colonoscopies at a very wide interval. And so if you've had, God forbid, colorectal cancer, and it wasn't diagnosed for a certain amount of time, suddenly it can go from very, very early stage to a later stage where you need chemo radiation, which is also more expensive. So like you said, now Amazon could make that claim like, hey, I just want to make sure you don't have cancer, give me that juicy, that sounds weird now, but that data.
I've just
for about
I
10
like to
years,
keep my
there have
shit
been,
very private. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, uh, yeah, bro. Um, the, for about 10 years, there has been available, and I don't know where it's in use or if it still is in use, but I know it was part of the early days of Health 2.0, a swallowable pill with an x ray camera in it that collected data and took pictures of the digestive tract. And I'm not sure
Oh, it's
what
very
happened.
popular. It's very,
Oh,
very popular. Yeah, we use it all the time.
So
yeah,
he,
okay.
Absolutely.
So
uh,
there's another way of
yeah.
doing it, you know. I mean, we healthcare things come very slowly into healthcare, into general knowledge and general use, but I'm glad that you're using it all the time.
So it says
I
in.
just quickly.
Go ahead, Carl.
Sorry, just thank you, Sal. I always seem to keep interrupting you. I'm sorry, dude. Uh, I got a message, a DM from somebody in the audience. I don't know if this person's got their hand up or not. Might be worth having a quick check, Tyler, but maybe not. Just about the privacy aspects of this and the ethical aspects of this. And it's another example of one of these things. We were kind of just talking about it really, where it's when you take it out of the emotional box, it's factually a very good idea. More information about your health is a very good idea. But then when you put it in the context of society and humans, it can potentially be a very, very bad idea. And one thing that's just come to mind while I was thinking about that, the ethics of it and how it could go wrong, is imagine if you have something installed like the toilet that Dr. Francine, and hearing you say, yeah, bro, has made my day. The Dr. Francine was talking about the smart toilet. Imagine if you have that in your house and a friend comes around with their teenage daughter and uses it, and it detects the markers for pregnancy before maybe even she knows, or before she wants the parents to know, and then that comes through to your app. Or maybe you have a daughter where she doesn't want that to be known by her parents, and this could go very, very badly, very, very easily.
But the thing is that already happened, and it's years and years ago. It was a 14-year-old teenager in the
And
U.S.
this
that
is Google.
actually did get maternity clothes advertisements mailed to her on the post box. We call it catalogs with maternity clothes, and she barely knew it herself, and certainly not her parents. And there was a large role around that, and that was, I think it was Walmart's customer something that
Target.
actually
Target.
found her.
Did
It
we
was
did we
Was
just
Target.
full
Target,
circle
yeah.
back to privacy? That's hilarious.
I think we did ever so slightly,
Yeah.
but it's not just pregnancy. It's if knowing if somebody has been using weed or any other kind of drugs, or whether they're drinking again, for instance, if somebody's on like an AA program and that it alerts you, another family member or a friend or whatever, because you use that toilet, that there's alcohol in the system. Like it's as it becomes cheaper and more commercialized, and the apps that connect to it become smarter.
Well, you just have to log into your toilet, and it's user one, and then user two, and then guest. You
I
know,
love the
and
concept that the lid won't open until you make an account.
yeah, exactly. You just log in to the toilet as a guest, and the information
Oh,
is not
I,
seen
I
by
can I
anybody.
can
But
just see the login with Facebook like
I know,
pop
but
up
see,
now.
here's the other deal. If you live in Texas and you want to have an abortion, the earlier you know, the better.
I mean, this
So,
might actually get me using Facebook again if I could share my data, on my account in real time. That you know, I, that would fit really nice with my Facebook usage pattern of. I'm sure all of my friends.
There is a lot of shit on Facebook.
Yeah, there's a whole. I mean,
Oh, that
yeah,
brings a new meaning to the phrase shit posting.
yes. It says you could get personalized alerts for having more fiber or avoiding certain foods to avoid flare-ups. And a remote smart toilet could help doctors monitor patients with chronic conditions with like irritable bowel syndrome or spot early signs of disease, obviously. And the company said in February it had raised $14 million in funding and is working towards getting clearance from the FDA. Some diagnostic experts argue that the value in a smart toilet would come from being able to analyze the molecular substances in patient samples, and other devices, including smartwatches, can easily monitor blood pressure and heart rate. If you want someone to use something, it has to be incredibly simple, says Chad Adams, president and chief executive officer at MedLife. And everybody has to go to the bathroom. So that's a great point. It doesn't require any, you don't have to put the watch on or recharge. It's got its own power and everything. So it's kind of automatic in that way. And this company, Medic Life, first plans to sell its toilets to assisted living facilities where it can help track residents' vital signs, body weight, even the sugar and sodium levels in their urine, among other metrics, before expanding to general consumers. A future version for assisted living facilities, pharmacies, and healthcare providers would diagnose certain infections such as urinary tract. Now, here's where it gets good. Here's where it gets juicy. Google also has a patent for a toilet seat that doubles as a cardiovascular monitor, filed in 2015. Although it isn't clear whether the company is pursuing the project, Google Health declined to comment. And toilet makers say that their products can provide medical grade results for some vital signs and urine tests, but a smart toilet that can analyze the broader chemical makeup of waste is likely further off. Another key barrier is privacy. A 300-person survey conducted by the Stanford team found that 1/3 of respondents were uncomfortable with the concept of a smart toilet that collects health data, with many citing privacy of their shit as a chief concern.
Just quickly, Azita has her hand up,
Okay,
Tyler.
sure.
So she's been trying to get up for a little while. And I think she'll mention about this because we've been having a chat in the back channel, but made a really good point about hiring processes, how a lot of roles already require you to do mandatory drug tests, for instance. And if this is more effective and faster, then like why not? And then once you have them on the premises, if you say, well, the company uses them for drug tests, that means they need access to the information. And if they are on premises and they have access to the information from that device, then it's a sliding slope. Then when does it become, every month you must use toilet B because toilet B is a smart toilet. The rest of the month you can use the normal toilets, but once a month you need to go in there, otherwise you lose out on the company health insurance, for instance.
I didn't think of that.
I love it, Carl. Thank you so much. Those were exactly my questions for the room. These ethical implications. We know how we have to select people and we ask them to do drug testing and we ask them to do urine samples and such. And this way, I don't actually give it to my friend to do it. I actually have to do it on the premise and you get the results right away. So those are some of the things that I'm wondering about in terms of the ethics of this.
Yeah, I had not thought about that. Like employers who are worried about drug usage by their employees could put this in the. That's really interesting.
Especially in the US, where healthcare is often tied into your contract. Like, that's not so much a thing in the UK, but I know it is in the US. And there's a financial incentive to know that, like you were saying, hey, you're drinking loads at home at the moment, we're going to have to adjust your premiums.
That's wild. Okay, so next headline is...
Tyler.
Yes.
Can I just mention something? I
Sure.
was in the clubhouse,
Yes.
and then I have a friend that's staying at my house because we're going to work together. And I said, I come to this room every day. And he said, who is it that talking? I said, Tyler. He said, oh, Tyler? So he knows you.
Tyler, what's up? It's Nima from Founder Institute back in the Bay.
Oh,
How's it going,
wow.
man?
Yeah, long time.
Yeah, so random, dude. He said Tyler. I'm like, there's only one Tyler that would be leading or talking about this kind of stuff. How you been, man?
Okay, real good. How are you?
You still in Sweden, or where are you?
Talking shit.
Yes,
And
we're
only
talking
Tyler
shit over
does
here.
it.
Yeah, no, I'm professionally in Sweden, physically in Thailand, but I prior to the pandemic, I'm hosting a monthly event in Stockholm that I fly every month for, and hopefully
Oh wow,
start doing again very soon. Hopefully next month.
that's cool, man.
Yeah,
Anyway, I just
Well, just wanted to say hi. It's so random.
yeah.
Say what's up and
It's
this
a
is the power of Clubhouse that brings everyone together. But
yeah,
sorry about that. Go on.
no problem.
For how long ago did you last meet? Just for the interest.
I don't know when was the
when
Founders Institute event.
when did you leave the Bay Area? Like 2011, 2012?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah, that's
12.
the
Yeah,
last time we talked. Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember.
So
That's the
almost
last time
10
we talked.
years.
Yep.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the power of Clubhouse.
yeah. So the next one up is from the Wall Street Journal about Instacart's CEO details plans to expand its online ad platform, focusing on consumer products and its delivery business as its delivery business slows, and they are kind of doing a bit of a building at the same time that the delivery space is getting really crowded. They are preemptively and I think very intelligently noticing that trend that they might not be ideally suited to win that horse race because they don't own their own vehicles and aren't, the real winners of the delivery games are going to be the companies who have the autonomous cars like Tesla, like Google. And I think they are correctly analyzing that. And so they're shifting a bit of resources and focus into a digital advertising of all of the, because if you're doing a lot of there's two parts to this whole e-commerciification and deliveries like that Instacart is in a competition with Deliveroo and Panda and all of these companies, Grab in Southeast Asia, Uber Eats, whatever. Is they are currently receiving the orders on their apps, so they know what you're consuming, and then they're delivering it. Those are two totally separate things. Some companies today, a lot of companies do both, like Instacart. They receive your order, they deliver your order. They might not be delivering your order in the future. Some other company might, but all of that juicy data that they get from your orders can power an ad network, just like Google powers an ad network based on the stuff you type into Google, just like Facebook powers their ad network based on all of the inputs you put into Facebook. Instacart can build a really robust ad network. They can target everybody who's buying Skippy's peanut butter and do a special ad for anyone who wants to target people who buy Skippy's peanut butter, which is probably Skippy's competitors, to send you ads to, get a coupon to try, their competing product. Or diapers, you're buying some brand of diapers or Kleenex or toilet paper, or whatever. These products would want to target their competitors' consumers. So building an ad network makes plenty of sense. No pun intended. So that's what this article is about. Essentially, Instacart wants to do more than just deliver your yogurt and snacks. It wants to advertise them too. The 9-year-old digital grocery service, which helped shift shoppers from supermarket aisles to smartphones, now is making a push into selling online advertising. It is hiring veterans from Facebook, which is one of the two biggest ad platforms, period, and developing platforms for video and other services aiming to tap a multi-billion-dollar digital advertising business. It also is being pursued by Walmart and Kroger. Kroger is the biggest food supermarket chain in America, and some of the biggest consumers. The Instacart CEO, new appointed CEO, said, "We have such a big opportunity. The challenge is executing fast enough to capture it." and went the CEO who spent a decade at Facebook and helped lead its mobile platform said Instacart's specialization in groceries can give it a strong position in consumer product advertising. Instacart and other grocery delivery services such as DoorDash and Uber Eats become valuable to U.S. supermarkets last year as COVID-19 led more consumers to do online shopping, but delivery companies have struggled to turn consistent profits with rising labor costs and transportation costs squeezing profit margins. Venture capital-backed Instacart, which has said it plans to go public, doesn't disclose financials, blah, blah, blah. But now I think you get the point of the article. But I only just read the very beginning of it. So I will tweet it out for those who want to read the whole thing. And as we do, tweet out every article to our Twitter account at TNATW. So the next one up is about Didi's, is the Uber of China. And now the Financial Times headline says Didi's ride-hailing rival in China called Chow Chow, which is owned by the Chinese automaker Geely, which owns Volvo, amongst other car companies. It's becoming a huge powerhouse in China, and I would even say globally, especially in EVs. And so Didi's new competitor, Chow Chow, which is owned by Geely, raises nearly $600 million from Chinese state-owned funds and had 10 million monthly active users in July. That's a lot for a ride-hailing company. And the fact that it's raising the money from Chinese state-owned funds means now Didi's competing with the CCP. So that's the investor you want. If you're a Chinese tech company, you want the government investing in your company. That's the best investor you can have in China. So because they're writing the laws that give you an asymmetrical advantage or a tragic disadvantage. So Didi needs to now tread very carefully, and Chow Chow has their work cut out for them, partnering with Geely, who's actually making the fucking cars. So Didi doesn't make their own cars. And now you can understand if you're doing an Uber-like company, which Uber doesn't make its own cars either. And Elon Musk has always pointed out that in the not so distant future, every Tesla could soon compete with Uber. And Tesla could have an Uber-like network of autonomous cars driving all over the place. And what's Uber going to do when Uber doesn't have its own cars? Well, they tried to partner with a car manufacturer and do an autonomous thing, and that didn't really work out. And you can see how complicated this all gets. And the delivery of people and products and services. And it's just like the last article about Instacart. Instacart doesn't have its own cars, let alone its own autonomous EVs that can do all the deliveries. So this whole game is going to get really crazy in the next few years. Anyway, especially if your investor is the government, especially in China. So the next one's from TechCrunch, that a Bangladesh company called ShopUp, which aims to digitize neighborhood stores in the country, raises $75 million, bringing its total to raising $100 million. And boy, is that a good business to be in, digitizing the mom and pops of India. Because, again, relates to the last headline of the autonomous delivery cars. And because once you have a city covered in autonomous delivery vehicles that are super intelligent, super AI, can do the deliveries way faster than any human ever can, then it doesn't make sense to go to stores yourself. You just touch on your phone, bring me this in 5-10 minutes. That's what's going to happen, especially in places, like in India. And so if for the mom and pops to compete with the Amazons, just like this happened in China, where you had Alibaba and then you had Pinduoduo digitized all of the mom and pops in China, and what's called Pinduoduo, and then surpassed Alibaba. And now in America, you have Shopify partnering with all of the social media companies, including TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram, and all of them. And they're soon going to create the digital shops that is going to make it easy for every mom and pop shop to have their own online presence. And now ShopUp is doing the same in India. Every mom and pop store will be digitized. And once they're digitized and the consumer behaviors change where you don't need to get in your car and go shopping, you can just do everything from the touch and convenience of your sofa and your phone. It's going to be huge. Mom and pops in
When
your
you say mom and pops, are you referencing like the corner shops,
yes,
like in England?
yeah.
Yeah.
Even 7-Elevens. 7-Elevens in Thailand all do delivery now for free. So, and 7-Elevens are all the mom and pop shops in Thailand. Like, they have a massive monopoly in Thailand. Like, everything is 7-Eleven in Thailand. So, and in Japan, you have the konbinis. We call them convenience stores. Japanese have a difficult time pronouncing the word convenience store, so they call them konbinis. And konbinis is 7-Eleven and Family Mart and Lawson's and Sunkus, and together they're everywhere. They blanket Japan. And if they start doing deliveries, although you're never more than 10 meters from a goddamn convenience store in Japan, so I don't know that they even need to do deliveries. In Japan's case, or in Thailand's case, you're sometimes 200, 300 meters from one, and they'll just bring it to you. So, but this the benefit that the mom and pops have is the immediate geography. So if they're already within a mile of 1 or 2 miles or kilometers, they can deliver in 10 minutes, where Amazon is going to have a hard time competing with that because they're based on a different model where they have a distribution warehouse on the outside of town. They can probably do 1 hour delivery, maybe 30 minutes, but that 10-minute sweet delivery time, that the mom and pops, that's their opportunity. They can just
So what I'm hearing is basically maybe the McDonald's model where it's like you have a corner shop everywhere, and whoever centralizes the corner shops correctly and has the right locations for everywhere, you can possibly like ship stuff within that small period of time. But it all depends on which locations that you get, correct?
Yeah, but the McDonald's is doing all delivery for free now in Thailand as well. It's like everyone's starting to realize it started during COVID, but it's going to last after COVID. Like they just realize like whoever's doing free delivery wins. Like you get all the business. And boy, has this shaped consumer behavior to ordering everything off of their phones. So
will McDonald's? Oh, not to cut you off, but like I was just thinking, will McDonald's or even Amazon add more corner shop sentiments to them? So like the energy drinks, the sweets, and all of those things, because I know they do Hermes deliveries in London and England as well. So there's just more opportunity for Amazon here, I would say.
yeah. Yep, Starbucks here as well. That's just what has played out in the last year and a half here. The 7-Elevens, McDonald's, Starbucks, everyone's doing delivery. I was surprised to find out that in Sweden, all of the Starbucks basically closed down because of the regulations there or whatever. Like all the cafes are kind of offline at the moment. Like, why not let them do delivery? So, Ellen, what's happening with cafes in Norway? I think they're opening back up now over the summer, but due to the regulations, were they forced to close? I don't know if Ellen's listening. Yeah.
No, they were closed for a while.
Yeah.
But everything is open again now.
Right. Johan?
In Sweden, they had a regulatory how many they could seated inside, and there was a maximum of 4 people on one table, and was one table in between. So they had this typical police tape: "Do not enter" around chairs and tables where you're not. You shouldn't sit, and they had quite a limited number. A cafe that usually could hold 60 people were limited to 16 type.
Right. So, but
they were open. They were open all the way through the pandemic.
But I was just watching video of somebody walking around Stockholm, and the Starbucks were closed.
I have not been to Stockholm since the pandemic began.
Okay.
But in Gothenburg they are open.
Okay.
All of them.
Ranjit here.
Yes.
I mean, it's more crowded after August, after the summer vacations, and a lot of offices has announced the opening date as October 1st now.
Okay.
So there is an official confirmation also from health department that you can prepare for office opening from October.
Okay.
But in the case of Starbucks, I think this was news for quite a while now. Starbucks is not able to compete with the locals over here. So that is one of the issues they really face.
Starbucks shutting down in Sweden?
I think there were one or two shut down already, but the main problem they face is Espresso House, which is like
yes, I know.
everywhere.
I know.
And then the local cafes
yes.
everywhere. So that is one of the primary issues with the Starbucks.
Yeah.
But they are open in some premier locations like the Drottninggatan, then in the Mall of Scandinavia. Some premier locations they are open.
Right. But the
but
one
not
in
like
the one in Stureplan's gone now, yeah?
I'm not sure about
Okay.
that. I haven't been there for a while.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
The one on Avenyn in Gothenburg and the one on the railway station is open, as well as the one in Gamlestad.
Yeah, because the company who opened Starbucks in Scandinavia is actually the railway company, the Norwegian railway company that owns the stations.
Oh, I had no idea about that.
Yeah. So, that's it. We've now covered the big boring headlines that that are popular at the moment on Twitter, but those are not the interesting headlines that we all came to discuss. What we do is share all of the really interesting headlines that we're finding all over the internet. And like this one that Messi found from Africa, and about China. The headline says, in Nigeria, China backed OPay, which is a fintech in Nigeria, which is a Chinese founder with Chinese investors, and it's now become a unicorn, a fintech unicorn in Africa, namely Nigeria. And they face Indian money laundering accusations now. Nigeria's payment app OPay was hailed as Africa's third largest unicorn on August 20th, after a $400 million injection or investment by SoftBank and others, who valued the company at $2 billion. But now OPay has been caught up in accusations of money laundering by Indian authorities. Chinese billionaire Zhao Yahui, who controls OPay, has been in trouble with foreign regulators before, having been forced to sell dating app Grindr by U.S. fears over data protection, and accused by short seller Hindenburg of predatory short-term lending. Oh boy. Private loan company PC Financial Services is under fire after police in India seized $14 million last Thursday in what is expected to be a case of money laundering. Oh boy. Or I should say OPay. And by the way, the journalist who wrote the story wrote as a funny headline, it says, "Oh no pay." The company's name is OPay, and they said, "Oh no pay." Ouch. So I just tweeted that one out. Thank you for that one, Messi. And then Adriana, who's in the audience, sends in this one from Vice about, the headline reads, anti-vaxxers are learning how to game TikTok's algorithms, and they're going viral, no pun intended. A Vice World News investigation led to TikTok removing over 50 videos, many of which had been on the platform for weeks and had been watched millions of times. This TikTok spreading COVID misinformation that they found was seen 1.2 million times and had gained several thousand new followers in just a few days. It's one of the more than 50 videos that the account posted over August and September, which featured clips of people appearing to have seizures and describing their symptoms as adverse effects of the COVID vaccine. And it shows an individual claiming that they are NHS staff and that they had received a COVID vaccine. and they're claiming it was causing them seizures and paralysis and left them with interesting neurological tics. And they just wanted to show these neurological tics and after effects that they're having on their TikTok videos, but they're purely doing this to become viral. It's complete bullshit. They're not NHS staff, and they're not actually having real symptoms from COVID. But people are desperate and thirsty for those to become viral on TikTok. So
honestly, it's yeah, not to cut you off. I can feel like I keep cutting you off. Sorry about that. But it's generally a plague, honestly. Like with all the work that I do, just to put the right information out there. The young people generally say, "Look on TikTok, it's over there." Like all of this, like anti-COVID information is they're all getting it from TikTok. I know we've got the Facebook ones, but a lot of them are getting data or just certain types of information, especially like flat Earth information, anti-vax information from TikTok, and it's really hard to beat the memes with like just when you're speaking to them with facts, honestly. And that's why I said the scientists are being beat out by memes like quite some time ago, and obviously with what the Reddit community was doing, that like I praised them for that, because literally the only way to beat this these I don't know what to call them, but the anti-vax memes is to really have pro-vax memes. And I know it's like some people think it's a stoop to their level thing, but at the same time, this is how a lot of young people are absorbing information, and they don't know really the real threats of Delta.
So check this out. Watch this, everybody. This gets real crazy real quickly. So, TikTok is a Chinese app, and Donald Trump tried to ban it. I think most people are familiar with that point, but watch this. So, TikTok also exists in China. And in China recently, last week, two really interesting things happened. The government, the CCP, invested directly into TikTok and took one of the 3 board seats of TikTok, meaning they have incredible influence on TikTok. They are a significant owner and a driver of the decisions of TikTok. And that's one thing that happened in the past week. Something else happened last week. China now says they need to control the algorithms of TikTok in China to control what people are seeing on TikTok. And they specifically said they want to remove vulgar content and reduce celebrity fanaticism. And they want to remove content that will weaken, China and the glorious future of Chinese citizens, right? That happened last week. We read those headlines as a group here together. Did we not? Cheryl, can you confirm?
Yes, we did.
Yes,
Charles
we did.
is in the room too.
Charles, no doubt will remember we discussed that as well. Now, this is really amazing because this headline is brand new. This just came out on Vice about the anti-vaxxers on TikTok's algorithms, and they're going viral. And Vice itself noticed so much of it that they are now addressing TikTok directly to remove these viral videos and asking TikTok to make comments. And TikTok did not respond to our questions over how the videos are amplified and etc. But follow this through. You have a Chinese app that's very by the way, headline yesterday, and matter of fact, in the past 24 hours, TikTok just passed YouTube in the number of viewable minutes per day as like the most viewed app in America, a number of minutes per day by American users. So hold that thought. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is Chinese owned. The CCP just took one of the 3 board seats. And point number 3, they just announced publicly and very transparently, they want to control the algorithms because they don't want their citizens exposed to content that'll turn their brains into pickles, and make sure that they have a healthy future generations that aren't going to be contaminated with, shit content and vulgar content. That's their word. And they want more Marxist literary criticism and more. The Ministry of Arts and Culture got all up in it, and they want more meaningful content and reduce the shit content and the vulgar content and the celebrity fan mania and all that nonsense. Note, and by the way, I highly suspect they don't have a COVID misinformation problem on TikTok in China.
That was what I was going to ask, Tyler, is if you did an A/B test of China versus US, exact same questions, what would the results be? And then ask yourself.
Yeah, I mean,
Ask yourself as
I
a
have to
society.
say,
But watch where I just have to put
yeah, I know where he's going.
the pretty little bow on this bad boy, because Facebook is also dealing with a whole lot of COVID misinformation, and they've acknowledged it, and they've said it's coming from China. And so TikTok, which is a Chinese app, is it not possible that the CCP, understanding the power of the algorithms and people being exposed to shit content that'll rot their fucking brains, isn't it possible that the CCP itself is intentionally doing what the Facebook's head of security says they're doing, using their own app to do it, namely
So
TikTok?
Tyler, here's some evidence. Here's some evidence to prove that. So I'm just letting people know also that Sophia Smith Gellar is currently working on a Clubhouse article as well, talking about anti-vaxxers.
Oh,
But I
by
was
the
going to say
way,
that,
I'm noticing, I think we all are, and Ellen and I spend a lot of times in these anti-vaxxer Clubhouse rooms, and we're asking ourselves, where are these people getting all of this shit-brained content?
They're getting it from TikTok and they're getting it from China. So let me walk you through the data. According to that article, she said that
grab
some
your
of those
grab your hats in the United States. Yeah, I'm gonna get my
so
tinfoil. Don't worry.
some of them, some of these people, they're getting millions of views. And if you know anything about TikTok's algorithm, you know that you have to have a lot of followers to get those kinds of views. But some of those people, according to the article, had less than 1,000 followers and had millions of views. Number one. Number two, they were on people's For You page, which is a huge deal. That doesn't just happen. So if it's across many people's For You page with less than 1,000 followers, either it's broken or it's on purpose. And to your point, I mean, those to me, I've never heard of an algorithm that amplifies things in that way. She also did say that it was the way that it was put together, but I'm pretty sure Charles can speak to this. This is not a thing where they were saying that it was saying, it wasn't in writing saying that there was vaccine misinformation. What they were saying is, I can't remember the exact words, but they were positive words. I think it was just like uh, safe and effective AstraZeneca, but they were being ironic. And it's really hard for AI to catch irony. That was the only explanation that came out. But I just think that that's ridiculous because I'm sure people were reporting them too. But it's absolutely, it seems so on purpose that it's obvious. But again, I'm also biased.
So Danish, one question. I'm sorry, Tyler. Do the follows increase commensurately with the increasing views, or are they still 1,000 follower people with millions of views? Because mathematics doesn't work that way. Okay, if I watch you and I like the video, I'm likely to follow you, even if I'm unlikely to follow people in general.
Yeah, and
I mean,
so the answer is in that situation they didn't. But Charles, your thought?
no, I mean, look, there is a concerted strategy of the Chinese state to push people towards vaccines that don't work, right? Which we're seeing in Thailand, we saw in Sri Lanka, a number of other kind of countries that took the Chinese vaccine, or to push them towards testing that doesn't work. I mean, DCVC is the sort of Chinese front that's invested money in things like Curative, which is one of the larger testing scams out there. And then you have them pushing this sort of like anti-vaccine narrative. Now, I should say, by the way, like, I don't believe that everyone should get vaccinated. I think you should run your own genetics, see if you have a high likelihood of having a heart attack or having venous thromboembolism, and people should make their own determinations. Like, I don't favor vaccine mandates, so I'm certainly not one of those, like, believe whatever CDC says. And especially now that it came out, I think people might have noticed the Intercept story that came out that more or less confirmed that the gain of function research that was in China was funded by the US taxpayer. And thank God for the British on this, because they sort of forced a lot of the conversation about China and American medical establishment being too closely linked. But I should just say, like, yes, there is a concerted strategy on the part of the Chinese state on all of its different, all of its different levels to basically make people sicker, or to lock down their countries. And that is what they're trying to achieve. It's not really complicated to see. And, of course, people pick this up on wiretaps. I mean, this is not unknown to the U.S. intelligence services.
They're they're making a concerted effort to eliminate things that pull down on their own society while pushing it onto the rest of the world. Just kind of put that in perspective. I'm
Right. I
not
mean,
going to make any
Bitcoin
judgments
is,
or calls.
yeah, Bitcoin was banned in China, but of course, like they have no issues with Bitcoin elsewhere. And then you look at things like, how they're responding to the pandemic internally versus how they, all their technologies and what direction they push people in.
Well, there's a historical context of the opium wars in Hong Kong, where the UK was intentionally pushing opium into the Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Guangzhou region, and China said stop doing that because you're getting all of our people addicted to opium, and it's what a incredibly sinister thing to do. But that's still very fresh in their mind of a foreign government.
That's how they justify all of the fentanyl production that they do, in right now, where they send that fentanyl production into the United States and elsewhere.
I'll have to find
Yes.
the article I just read over the weekend of precisely
And you
of
have to remember, and you have to remember, leading up to this, it was very, very touchy in Hong Kong. The UK was proposing citizenship for all of its citizens. There was discussions about, was the treaty between the CCP and Hong Kong even and the UK even valid because of the communist revolution. And so, people were threatening to come and try to take Hong Kong back. And if you know anything about Hong Kong, it's over China's dead body.
Well, there's this concerted thing that's going on with countries kind of near abroads, right? You can see this with Russia and the Ukraine, or America and the Caribbean, especially seeing what's gone on with Cuba or gone on with the Bahamas, which has all sorts of interesting Russians flying around there. And of course, you see this with China and Hong Kong and Taiwan, where there are these sort of like, you know, essentially they're like satellites of the main country. And that's sort of where a lot of the foreign actors tend to congregate. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein, of course, is in the Virgin Islands. Kind of gives you a sense of like how people stage attacks on the kind of the main country. So yeah, I mean, look, we are going to see this, this kind of disinformation campaign on the part of different nation states continue. And what I always say to the Chinese when they make a big fuss about this sort of thing, what I always say to them is I always say, like, look, the opium wars were like 150 plus years ago. Like, do you really want to relitigate them now? Well, I mean, we can if you want, but then we're going to relitigate, a whole bunch of other things as well.
So September 3rd, which was just Friday, South China Morning Post, one of the best publications in all of Asia, based in China, says the headline reads: China rejects blame for sharp rise in U.S. fentanyl overdoses. Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C. blasts congressional report finding that Beijing has failed to stop the synthetic opioid reaching the U.S. Reports claim that China is sending raw materials for the drug to Mexico is irresponsible and utterly false, but there's been investigative journalist reports with all the sources named that they tracked it all down to Chinese pharmaceutical suppliers who initially, and the journalist, went undercover and became a manufacturer to write the story. I read it over the weekend. It was kind of mind blowing.
So
And yeah,
Clearview busted one of the largest fentanyl dealers in the country. And after he was busted, who, by the way, happened to be ethnically Chinese, after he was busted, all of Clearview started getting hacking attempts from the Chinese, from actors in China right after this guy was arrested. So if you look at, AMLO was meeting with AMLO was meeting with the mother of El Chapo, and there's a concerted effort by the drug cartels to build on the Sinaloa side to build basically a road from Sinaloa up to the U.S. Border, which would give essentially the Chinese who've been bringing in fentanyl through Sinaloa a vehicle for doing that. So this is the beginning of a very destabilizing period when it comes to drugs and it comes to these sorts of things. And if you know people who are of Scots-Irish heritage, they tend to be the ones who are disproportionately affected by opium. And you should get sequenced and make sure you don't have the variants for opioid addiction. And if you do, to just never touch this stuff, even in a clinical setting.
Yeah. It says deaths surged by more than 21,000 to eclipse a record set for the year. Combating fentanyl smuggling has become a key priority for U.S. agencies as overdose deaths spiked to more than 93,000 last year. And however, Chinese regulatory authorities delay requests for access to inspect and investigate potential sites where companies illegally manufacture precursor chemicals that Mexican and other foreign drug cartels use to produce fentanyl. So China's not cooperating to. They're claiming that they were stopping the sales of it to Mexico, and then America says, "Great, let us inspect that." And then China's like, "No, you can't inspect that." So, it's
They're also super pissed about how we're increasingly using satellites to track all these illegal shipping into Mexico. They really hate that. They lose their shit over it.
Okay, so anyway, we mentioned that because of the point of poisoning, adverse, non-ally countries, although in theory you're supposed to be allies. But the point of TikTok also playing a similar role, where there's potentially some precedents in the case of fentanyl to point to that perhaps the CCP is intentionally trying to poison people physically and mentally, and in the case of mentally and emotionally via TikTok with misinformation. So it's a really wild thing, and I imagine there will now be more investigations like this Vice investigation that was just published a few hours ago, where they said when Vice News approached TikTok with the videos, kind of the evidence that of this viral misinformation about COVID and vaccines, a spokesperson said, "We strive to promote an authentic TikTok experience by limiting the spread of misinformation, including audio, and promoting authoritative information about COVID-19 and vaccines across our app. This account violates our community guidelines, and we have removed it from TikTok." So when they confront them with it, they took down the account that was spreading information. But this is like, as somebody else said, it seems. Hopefully, there's more investigations.
This is deliberate. And look, I know President Trump was polarizing, but the unique thing about that guy was he was very loose cannon. All right. And so when he's telling you these things like, hey, we should ban TikTok, it's not on a whim. The dude's getting intelligence reports. He knows what's going on. Don't ever fool yourselves. Okay, I'm an American. Don't fool yourselves into believing we don't have the same level of snooping. We just won't ever admit it. But we had a president who would give you insights into what we know. And I'll just shut up after that.
Yeah, I would just say we have the best snooping in the world in my view, but the problem, of course, is there's often a disconnect between our intelligence services and our political services, because sometimes the political side of our country, is compromised in all sorts of ways. And I think Trump was a phenomenal marketer, but if you look at a lot of the problems that he identified, the Biden government is actually going and fixing. Which is, I think, a good sign for the health of the U.S. economy and the U.S. society generally. So I would say, just to put a bow on this, I mean, I think that in 2016 it was a choice between two very dangerous families, the Trump family and the Clinton family, and the Trump family revealed a lot of problems that are going on in the society wittingly and unwittingly. So, but I do think he was right about banning TikTok, and I think we should still ban TikTok. I don't think we should just hand it over to a campaign contributor of his, in the form of Larry Ellison or in the form of Oracle generally.
Okay, we got to
Yeah,
Do you know what's
change.
Tyler?
one of the issues was also QAnon, right? And if there was ever, a case for promoting conspiracy and in all sorts of variants was QAnon. And he wasn't, he didn't take any concerted efforts to close it down. In fact, he benefited from it and used QAnon for galvanizing his support, and particularly on, for instance, January the 6th. So, I don't
Yeah, I mean,
buy the fact that I don't buy the fact that Trump somehow magically had American interests at heart when he was
Going back to
banning.
the tech side of things, I just want to make sure that I got a question on this, which was, do we think, I mean, we've seen the rise of these smaller accounts, tons of them, right? Like, I'm just thinking about like the tech strategy that they've taken that are clearly, let's assume that there is no bad faith acting. Is there something specific that they're doing? I was reading through the article again, and again, the point that she was trying to make was that there was some tactics in there that perhaps could be interpreted as being ironic. And like if you assume that there's no bad faith action from the Chinese government, you see similar things in the anti-vax rooms here on Clubhouse. Do you think that this is a strategy that, again, I disagree. I think there are bad faith actions and they're using the algorithms to their advantage. But the big question is like when we see the anti-vax rooms, I mean, Tyler, you were in a room a few days ago where you were trolling them, but I was going to say even the title of that room could not clearly, literally the title was, I'm not anti-vax, right? So do you think that this is a strategy that they're taking to not get caught by the algorithms and the algorithms need
Yes,
to be able to detect irony?
that's what the Vice article said.
yeah, I mean, what they
Well,
do, just to be clear about this, right? And QAnon is sort of an Israeli psyop. I think Sylvan was talking about that. There is a concerted game being played by the different powers to essentially weaponize all of the crazy people. January 6th, there was sort of a lot of true believing nuts who showed up there. And if you look at some of the reporting on January 6th, like a lot of those people had mental health issues. And that increasingly is kind of what's going on, is that different countries are building up databases of conspiracy theorists, of nuts, of all different types, as a way of deploying those people against their domestic, governments. And that's the sort of like disquieting thing that's happening through the use of technology. And if you think about it, like, we're all on Clubhouse and we're all giving it our voice. Many of us have our photos up. I mean, these are building biometric profiles of us, and we shouldn't kid ourselves that that's like what's really going on right now. So if you start saying a lot of like crazy stuff, or you start behaving in a way that indicates that you might be a schizophrenic, or might be suitably insane in some sort of other way, you will be approached by different entities and by different actors. And we've seen this now, especially with the Russians after January 6th, where a lot of people were trying to catch a lot of the rioters or the sedition hunters, and they were using facial recognition products to catch them. One in particular called PimEyes, where you can go and buy for like $30, I think it is. And what they were doing is they're using that PimEyes as a vehicle for building up databases of our sort of domestically mentally unwell people, because they know that those January 6th detainees aren't going to be there, ad infinitum. And so that's sort of like, the use of information technology to identify, to hypnotize, to control people, to build cults. All of that is very real. And I know I don't want to scare people, but like I know I've sat in briefings on this very topic, and it's something that people should be aware of, as they go and consume internet.
Okay.
And for last tinfoil hat thing, this doesn't even get into the stuff that we were aware of when we were children, meaning subliminal advertising and the effects. I mean, you don't even hear that word mentioned in society today, yet we have mediums that are completely unfiltered.
Okay.
Let that really, really, really sink in.
And there's never going to be a smoking gun in the end, because if state actors are involved, you will always have that plausible deniability.
Sure. So the next headlines I want to get into here, Todd sent in this one from The Verge. California new bill takes aim at Amazon's productivity hacking algorithms with a quote, "We cannot accept this as the new future of work." California bill takes aim at Amazon's productivity tracking algorithms. No worker should be forced to sacrifice their basic human needs, meaning going to the toilet, or accept such undignified conditions for a paycheck. We cannot accept this as the new future of work, is the headline. The California is poised to pass a new bill pushing back against the productivity measures used by Amazon's fulfillment centers, as recently reported by NPR and the New York Times. The bill passed California's lower legislative chamber in May, and the upper chamber is expected to vote this week. If passed, the bill will place new transparency requirements on automated quota systems and block any such systems that could endanger the health and safety of workers. They found hundreds of Amazon warehouse employees had been fired for failing to meet productivity quotas at a single facility in Baltimore over the span of just over a year. Associated documents showed a deeply automated system to track individual employees' productivity rates. Yeah, Amazon's a fucking data machine. That's what they do. It's going to be deeply automated because it's efficient. That's why they're winning. So that your accusation, they're going to agree with that is deeply automated. That's not a bug. That's a feature. So, to make next day delivery possible, corporations like Amazon have forced warehouse employees to work faster, service more customers with more orders in record amount of time, and risk their own bodies in the process. Assemblywoman Gonzalez said in a statement introducing the bill, no worker should be forced to sacrifice their basic human needs or accept such undignified conditions for a paycheck. We cannot accept this as a new future of work. Amazon has not publicly taken a position on the bill and did not immediately respond to requests. The text of the bill does not name Amazon, but it simply requires all warehouse employers in the state of California to give workers access to the details of any quota used to measure them. Specifically, employees can request a written description of each quota to which employers to which the employee is subject, including the quantified number of tasks to be performed or materials to be produced or handled within the defined time period, and any potential adverse employment action that could result from failure to meet the quota. So they want transparency in the kind of expectations mathematically. The bill would also block any quota system that prevents meal or rest breaks or use of the bathroom. Bathroom breaks are a particularly sore point for Amazon after the company's high-profile fight over anecdotal reports that the company's delivery drivers had been forced to pee in bottles while on the job. Amazon initially denied the reports, which resulted in dozens of drivers sharing their own experiences and difficulty taking bathroom breaks while on the job. However, most of the concern over the bathroom breaks has focused on delivery drivers who would not be subject to the Gonzalez bill. And would you be interested in getting a raise if you wore diapers?
Is that in the article, or you just asked that question?
I'm just asking.
Well, Tyler, I'm going to tell you something in all seriousness. This is how you end up with unions, okay? I mean, if you go back and you look at the history of the United States, it's because the government failed to protect workers from things that people thought were kind of like basic decency. So you ended up with a worse situation. You ended up with labor unions. And it would have been better if the employer on their own just said, maybe we'll make a little bit money, be a little bit less efficient, but not have to deal with unions, not have to deal with work rules, and treat everybody a bit better. Okay? If they don't do that, that's how they're going to end up with a union. Okay? Out where I am here in Las Vegas, and I know he's now just passed Sheldon Adelson. He doesn't have unions in his building. All the other casinos on the Strip do. You know why? He looked at whatever the union was doing. He said, "I'm going to do one better. I'm going to give you better health care. I'm going to give you child care on premises. I'm going to give you on premises dry cleaning." He did all these things. He said, "So you don't need a union." Okay, that's how you keep a union out. But so just think of that from that vantage point.
I'm with Ken. I'm with Ken on this. As much as I'm a critic of Sheldon Adelson, given kind of all kinds of shady things he was up to, and I should note, the U.S. government won't give us his FBI file because it's an active criminal investigation, given some of the weird things he was up to. But he was right about treating workers well, and I do think that what I've been told at the Amazon level is that they're going to trade a potential antitrust investigation against Amazon by actually raising the wages of their workers. That's going to be a sort of like strategic move that they're going to make. So I think that a lot of this stuff about how they mistreat their workers is sort of setting up that kind of efficiency wage, the sort of Henry Ford kind of gambit that they're going to do. I do wish that they would do it sooner, and I do think that there's something kind of unconscionable about the way in which a lot of our society grinds workers, and I think that's probably why we're seeing a labor shortage with a lot of these different jobs.
Yeah, but at the same time, we've got a record number homeless situation on our hands here.
Right, the homeless situation is a function of our property markets not being, homes are for living in.
Amazon housing.
I mean, we used to do that. I mean, there used to be company towns.
Company
There used to
store,
be,
company towns, yeah.
And I think in the case of California, where they don't allow you to build new houses, where they allow foreigners to buy property, which is, by the way, one of the few, the West is seemingly like one of the few places in the world in which you can buy, which we allow foreigners from nations that don't like us to buy property. It's kind of weird. Like, it's a strange behavior. Maybe we should be, making it so that you can't, have these ginormous homes that you can't, that people can't live in and can't afford.
But I wonder if
is that not an accepted tactic in China? Having your staff on property, actually in the building, there is a like a residential level to whatever sort.
Yeah, but it's not even in the case of China. It's not even a tactic, because what it is you have people from the outer, not in the cities, from the farms, and the farmer young folks come in, and they need a place to stay, and it's damn near impossible to get an apartment in the cities. So there's no option. This is very common throughout Thailand, for example. So where if you're in the same way that in America you provide the health insurance, in a lot of parts of Asia, the employer provides the actual housing, because the employment's happening in the cities. You as the worker and also are going to need a place to stay. That's just part of it. So it's not in the same.
How about Stockholm?
Stockholm might need to start considering the same, because by the way, if people think about moving to Stockholm to work for any big company, and these could be very high paying, very, even as a developer, even as an app developer, moving into Stockholm, you're not going to find a place to live. There is no place for you to move to. You have to buy an apartment. And so the companies, and I'm friends with the CEOs of the unicorn companies in Stockholm, we often talk about the idea of buying buildings to convert them into apartments for the company to have apartments for those people to move into. And it is, in fact, if you do get recruited by a Stockholm tech company, unicorn, they're going to have to help you find an apartment, or you're not, they as the tech unicorn know you're not going to get an apartment unless they actually arrange it for you. But my point is, Amazon, I wonder, with this massive, you have how many millions of people facing unemployment just ended yesterday? And so you might have a whole bunch of new people going out, and you have the people losing their free rent rules that were put into place in the U.S. during COVID, and that's now expiring and sunsetting. So you have a whole bunch of waves of millions of people who could likely become homeless in the very near future, like in the next few days and weeks. Could Amazon offer housing as part of the employment, but then wouldn't it make it harder to fire them at will, because Amazon's firing them not only at will, but algorithmically? There's Amazon employees reporting that they're being fired via email from algorithms that detected they didn't meet the prerequisite number of deliveries they were supposed to make that day. And what happens if you are also housed by Amazon and they are offering medical, but do you lose your house as well? Oh, you get an email saying, you're now fired and you are now also homeless. So maybe that's why Amazon
Or
isn't.
even that, how do you?
Tyler, you just answered your own question, by the way,
Yeah.
without knowing it,
Yes. No.
because you just said
I do know it, because my next sentence was that's almost certainly why Amazon isn't offering housing.
no. You said something about medical. So if they're already getting the medical, so under medical in the United States, they have something called COBRA, which basically means if you lose your job for any reason with your employer, you get to continue it for 18 months. You have to pay for it, but you do get to keep it for 18 months at their cost. And so they could do the same thing for housing. They could say you can continue to live here for another 18 months, but you have to pay, whatever the market rate is. Now, most people won't be able to do it, but, same thing with Cobra. Most people can't afford Cobra payments, but at least technically they can't kick you out the next day that way, or you won't be out without health insurance the next day.
While that offers a solution when it's in like the worst case scenario when you've lost your job or whatnot, but what about when you're still in the role and you're considering some sort of litigation? Maybe your rights have been infringed. Maybe you want to make a complaint, that kind of thing, against a senior. Maybe the working conditions are terrible, which we've seen year on year on year. I mean, it's already the case that a lot of people in UK in US employment won't actually join in legal action or even are worried about joining unions and that kind of thing because things like healthcare are tied to their roles. I mean, when your housing is tied to it as well and you're working for Amazon, I mean, are you really going to complain about the working conditions if you not only lose your healthcare, your job, your income, but then also potentially your housing?
Well, I mean, what's likely to happen here is that you'll see either they'll have to raise wages or they will automate more and more of the jobs. And I'm sure you've noticed that the rise of kiosks everywhere, which seems to be a standard across the world now, because essentially, you're competing. If you're a worker, a low-skilled worker, you're competing against essentially Chinese or sort of third world slaves or against robots. And you can see this in a lot of farming communities. I frankly think we should do in the West. We should basically subsidize automation when it comes to these sort of terrible jobs that have a socially. But I do wonder, why it is that we don't see a Henry Ford efficiency wage where Amazon and others don't just say like, hey, I'm going to double the wages and just competitors at the knee. And that's something I've always kind of wondered, like why they don't do that. Now, I think it's partly because the stock market might try and punish them, but I don't think that that's necessarily true because you could have your pet employees.
Did his mic just cut out?
I thought that was me.
Yeah.
My counter question, my counterpoint to that would be they deliver things for free. Like, how can you have a company that can deliver something hundreds and hundreds of miles in less than 12 hours for free and also pay people a good wage?
Well, I mean, if you look at the margins on their AWS product, it's pretty crazy. And, that's something that they could use and indeed have used in the past. I mean, the U.S. government clearly wants Amazon to be successful. There are all sorts of ways in which it's stopped litigation against the company. There are all sorts of ways in which it's been helpful to the U.S. government when it comes to scanning, child porn on Amazon servers, which Tyler alluded to in the last session. So, I mean, I do think that there is a sense in which Amazon is our national champion. But if they're going to be our national champion, they should probably treat workers better.
Is the core problem here, not the fact that we expect year-on-year exponential growth from every major company? Like, as shareholders and sort of
Yes.
stock aficionados, is the fact that it's not acceptable for a company, oh, we only made $2 billion this year.
It's
Well, last year
unfair
you made $4
capitalism.
billion, so you're clearly losing money. Well, not, we made $2 billion. No. Last year you made $4 billion, so you're now losing money because you made
That's a
$2
great
billion
prop.
this
That
year.
is a great point, by the
That's
way.
the
It's
It's
the
always
problem to
unfettered
all of
capital.
this.
Yeah, I mean, if your critique, Carl, is that capitalism encourages growth, I mean, that's true, right? I mean, that just is what it is. I mean, it's endemic to the system, right? But the question, of course, is what do on what price is that growth purchased, right? Like, is it purchased at the destruction of our natural world, at the enslavement? I mean, Amazon could conceivably enslave all their employees, and then that would be sort of like 13th Amendment violations, right? But like, I'm sure that for a while they would juice the stock price. So obviously we have some regulations. The question is just to what extent will they be enforced and who will do the enforcing?
No, but Charles, I think the question that was raised was, I think, in the way I understood it, public company versus private company. Is there something about a public company with a publicly traded stock price that kind of forces them to
It,
to you know chase growth
it's
Infinitely
at no end?
infinite
it's the
optimization.
Right.
fiduciary responsibility nature of it, and look, it's not to bring highlight to my own endeavors, but I have this challenge, right? How do you build a company that's designed to scale but also stay focused on things that are important to you that make an impact? And the only way to really do that in a stock market environment is to set up what's called a public benefit corporation. They're traditional C corps, but we have a kicker. Our kicker is if we have a social or other societal goal that is named as part of our charter, if as long as we're in pursuit of that goal, we can't be held accountable for lack of performance on the fiduciary level. And so, when Greg Duffy was here, he really liked to criticize Tim Cook, right? But if Apple was a public benefit corporation that established itself as a leader in technology, but with a focus on human rights, they could do things about the Uyghurs. But if you're a shareholder of Apple and you hear like, hey, Apple, products are going to take a 10% hit on revenue, guess what? You're Tim Cook. You're like, well, I'm going to get slaughtered if I pull this move. I'm going to pull the move that's against what I want to do because of the fiduciary responsibility.
Well,
And
Chris,
I'll shut up now.
you're miss. I was on the board of directors of a public company. In fact, I was on the board of directors of a public
Image.
company.
I know, Ken, you've brought this up to me privately, but image is everything. Okay, the
No,
stock
no, no.
market is
Okay, no,
not
no, no.
based
But I
on
just want to be clear
fundamental; it's
about the
based
word
on momentum.
fiduciary responsibility. The word fiduciary responsibility does not mean that you have to maximize every last dollar. In fact, I can tell you,
But when you
there's never been there's never been a case where a board member that has ever held liable because growth was only 20% and not
because
30%.
we have D&O insurance.
No, no, no,
We
no, no.
have D&O
Because
insurance.
if you had D&O, you didn't even have to tap the D&O insurance. And by the way, the seminal case and it's because we spoke about Delaware on one of the other calls earlier in the night or something. The seminal case is from Delaware and it involved Time Warner, and I just don't remember who the other company was. A major company. Somebody tried to buy one big company, tried to buy another big company, offered a tremendously high price. There was no question; it was way above the market. The company didn't want to sell because they thought that long term they'd be able to get to a better number. I mean, obviously that's okay. They went to court, and the Delaware courts said the acquisition target had a right to reject the vastly higher number. They were not required by some fiduciary responsibility to sell out at
Yep.
just some.
It was
Okay,
Paramount. It was Paramount,
okay,
Ken.
so that's the case.
Yep.
Was it Paramount and
Yep.
Time Warner?
Yeah. Paramount tried to buy Time Warner at a much higher elevated price,
Yeah. Okay. So yeah.
and
So
then the court ruled in favor of Time Warner, saying, "Hey, we think we're going to be more valuable in the future."
yeah,
They sort of
and
stop the hostile takeover. In other
that's
words.
right. And by the way, companies do all sorts of social things all the time that you can make an argument or not in the best interest
But
of short
those are
term
usually
profits.
those activities are usually centered around maximizing tax efficiency. We're literally saying you can do bad for your company from a financial perspective and not get punished for it. Like it's like, a lot of the things that they do, the benefit is there, but they get a return from it. And that's all I'm saying is that, if your activities are always dictated towards getting a financial return from them, then that's what leads to this kind of unfettered capitalism. Believe me, I'm all for capitalism. I will sell a lemon to you if I can make 10% on it. That's just the way I am. But I do understand that, Apple can't keep this pace. You know, uh, um, it's just, I'll shut up.
Yeah, but
I
I
promise.
would say that it's the responsibility of the government and of consumers and all these other factors to also rein in Amazon's behaviors if it gets too extreme. I mean, I think that's sort of the role that we can play as consumers. Not purchasing things from Amazon. There's all sorts of things that can be done. Now it's harder and harder, obviously, given Amazon essentially controls the internet through AWS. And I think Kashmir Hill has done interesting work showing how hard it is to avoid all the tech companies, during the course of your work week. But I do think there is something to be said for, we can sort of publicly shame people who, who are executives at Amazon. I mean, there are lots of ways to sort of correct this beyond just the legalistic formulation of whether or not it's a public benefit corporation or not.
At a certain point, the tech companies become more powerful than the government, and the ability to rein in doesn't exist anymore because as long as you have politicians that can be bought off or regulatory groups that can be captured, eventually you get to a point where you're not able to do that anymore. And I'm kind of wondering what that point is, and if we've
Well, that's
already
because we
crossed
don't
it or if
enforce
it's in the future.
antitrust laws. But but to Chris's point, you don't need to become a public benefit corporation. You can go look around. There's hundreds of public companies, maybe well over 1,000 easily, that have all sorts of social goals that they list out in their annual report, from diversity goals to ESG goals to sustainability goals to all sorts of goals that you can make an argument, certainly in the short term, if they weren't trying to do any of those things, they could produce a higher profit. There is no fiduciary requirement to absolutely max out profits at like every single, no matter what the social costs. That legal framework does not exist.
You're correct, Ken.
And thank God for that.
There's no legal. You're absolutely correct, and I'll admit this to the audience. There's no legal framework that requires you to do that, but your shareholders can kick your ass out of there as a CEO if you don't do the job that you said you're going to do.
So,
And
Chris,
to
just
that
get
end,
yourself super.
and Ken, to that end, public benefit corporations have the flip side. If I don't meet my sustainability goals, if I don't meet my social goals, I lose my job.
Right. So what you should do, Chris, is get super voting stock like Mark Zuckerberg does, so nobody can vote you out. Own 5 shares, but have 60% of the votes.
I don't
Yep.
know. I only
Hey
have
Ken, I want to know how to do that.
Just look at what a lot of the media. Google has it. Or Alphabet has it. Facebook has it.
That's annoying.
Comcast has it. A ton of companies have it because unfortunately shareholders put up with it.
Okay, we got to.
Yeah, I'm of mixed minds about it. On the one hand, you want founders to be running companies, but on the other hand, you do want there to be mechanisms whereby you can get rid of Mark Zuckerberg if you want to. And right now, I mean, the only thing that really stops Mark Zuckerberg from running Facebook is if he gets arrested by the U.S. government. I mean, it's kind of like the only thing that can get him at this stage.
Tyler, 2 seconds.
Yep.
Could you please answer my DM on Twitter? Sorry.
Okay. I don't see it yet. So the next...
Oh, I sent it a while.
Try it again. Oh, yeah. That was a long while ago. Yeah, okay. 5 hours ago, right? The next headline up on for grabs from Dr. Fran from The Independent in the UK. More than 230 medical journals call for emergency action to limit global warming. And they claim the world cannot wait to reduce emissions until after the current necessary preoccupation with COVID-19. We must multitask and address climate change and COVID simultaneously. The next one's from Gareth in the audience, and the the headline reads, "What is 15-minute grocery delivery costing India's workers?" And just to give you, I just retweeted it out, and to give you a taste of it, it says, as COVID-19 remote work continues to bolster at-home dining, India's delivery companies are rushing to get the groceries to the doorsteps quicker. On August 17th, delivery outfit Grofers started promising 10-minute deliveries in 10 U.S. cities. And hyperlocal delivery startup Dunzo has also launched 19-minute deliveries in many big cities. With its Instamart option, food delivery giant Swiggy also guarantees food delivery within 30 minutes in most big cities. But backlash is brewing over the impact of ever-intensifying demands on India's delivery personnel and the ethics of framing exploitive marketing gimmicks as actually useful innovation. Minuscule delivery windows in cities known for intense traffic and tightly packed housing are likely to exacerbate poor working conditions for delivery workers who already contend with long hours and paltry pay. And the precedents being set today matter. India's quick commerce industry is set to grow at least tenfold by 2025. The case for quick grocery delivery in India. Globally, several players have tasted success with the quick delivery format. Getir in Turkey, Gorillas in Turkey, Dija in Britain, which has recently acquired US-based grocery platform GoPuff. In India, the trend is starting to catch on as consumer behavior evolves. Over the past few years, buying habits have shifted away from larger monthly purchases to smaller weekly ones. The number of single-person households interested in time-bound deliveries is increasing, and as is unplanned ordering. Additionally, COVID caused online ordering to substitute some neighborhood corner store visits. The demand for these services has been both boosted by consumer lifestyles that prompted heightened desire for convenience and immediate services. Delivery companies are racing to meet it, and how to do 10-minute delivery, the life of a rushed delivery driver, and where it looks at, is this sustainable? Should we be inflicting this on citizens? Is it healthy? Etc., etc. And notably missing is how long will these jobs continue before they're replaced by robots? That's notably missing from this article. But yeah, so people are asking about, the potential impacts of 15-minute delivery, which is now becoming a real thing. The next article is also from Gareth. This one's really quite interesting. It's from Wired, and the headline reads, "What makes an artist in the age of algorithms?" And it's an interview with EDM pioneer named BT, who's a producer, musician, artist, and he says some really interesting points where he says a lot of musicians like to argue that what they do is not replicatable by AIs. Notably, these are musicians who don't have any backgrounds in tech. He, having a background in understanding AI, says that he likes to point, when he argues with those friends, he points them to what Google has already done, where they've taken all of Bach's works and able to spit out Bach-like fugues, because Bach wrote so many fugues, which is a genre that Bach was very prolific in. And because Bach wrote so many of these pieces, he's a great example. Also, he's the father of modern harmony. Musicologists listen to some of the Google-created Bach pieces and can't distinguish them from Bach's original works. Again, this makes us question what constitutes an artist. I'm both excited and have incredible trepidation about the space that we're expanding into. Maybe the question I want to be asking is less, we can, but should we? And more, how do we do this responsibly because it's happening? Right now, there are companies that are using something like Spotify or YouTube to train their algorithms with artists who are alive, whose works are copyrighted and protected, but companies are allowed to take someone's work and train models with it right now. Should we be doing that, or should we be speaking to the artists themselves first? I believe that there needs to be protective mechanisms put in place for visual artists, for programmers, and for musicians. And he says, I imagine if we could turn somebody that I love, like Prince, into a training set, and also its intellectual property rights are owned and his estate are fairly compensated. All those I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and from the training set, the AI could generate new music, and then the artist is able to be everywhere at once. It would augment the artist's availability and would be completely revolutionary income streams for artists. For example, we could have these adaptive works that are suited contextually to people's daily lives, what they're doing, like if they're at the gym or if they're on in the bedroom falling asleep. And so their favorite artists could be singing to them, talking to them, painting for them in real time. I hope that's where we end up. And then
selling them ads.
Yes. Yeah, that too. And this hemorrhoid cream brought to you by Prince. So the interviewer from Wired says, so conceivably we can have algorithms producing music all day that sounds like an artist I'm a fan of, and that artist's estate could be properly acknowledged and compensated. He says exactly. Which, yes, that is where it'll likely go. Yeah, the question is, will the people that create these algorithms, will they feel the need to cooperate with the artists themselves if the art sounds too similar to, in this example, Prince or Bob Dylan or Bob Marley or the Beatles or what have you? Or if they just twist the algorithm just enough to sound similar and inspired by, but not an exact copy of, then you don't have to pay all of those royalties and rights to that artist. Like David Bowie. It sounds like David Bowie, but it's clearly not David Bowie. Then do I have to pay David Bowie's estate? For example, Led Zeppelin made some very direct copies of some blues legends, and there are other artists that made very direct copies of Led Zeppelin. This is just a fact of music. And the food industry is perhaps the most. And fashion, as somebody who had a clothing company who got ripped off by Urban Outfitters, and every fashion house rips off other fashion houses and vice versa. It's endless. And the same thing happens in food, where chefs are constantly ripping off each other with foam, duck foam confits and all. If you start becoming a real foodie and hitting the top 100 list, as I might be known to be known to do, these chefs, these 3-star Michelin chefs, are constantly ripping each other off. So the question is, what to do about this with AIs that are quote unquote influenced by notable artists, as BT correctly points out. Algorithms already do sound quite convincing. And the question of can they write good songs? Well, they write better songs than all 500 people in this room right now. Unless you happen to be one of the top 100 songwriters on the planet, they're already writing songs better than 7 billion people on the planet. It's the question is, can it write as good as the top 100 songwriters on the planet? And the answer is obviously yes. It will that will happen in our lifetime. As BT points out in this interview, that the process of writing songs is pattern recognition, and that's what machines can do far better than humans. So
not just pattern recognition, but pattern recognition given the current meme space or the
correct.
Current
it's writing memes.
Space.
You're right. You know what?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a great point. You raise a great point, Carl. And to that point, will we also see AIs writing actual memes? Because it also relates to humor, because comedians is also a space where when will AIs actually be able to write good comedy? It's an equal challenge. And comedians constantly are influenced by each other as well. So, and who's to say, oh, that joke is clearly a Dave Chappelle joke, or it's clearly a Jerry Seinfeld joke, or in the likings of. So it's going to get really wild and interesting in our own lifetime. Anyway, it's a really good article. So I just tweeted that out, and I think it was Todd or whoever sent that in. Thank you for sending that in. The next one's from Cheryl from South China Morning Post, that China's top app downloaded currently is developed by the police. Stoking privacy concerns is the headline from the South China Morning Post. An anti-fraud app developed by China's Public Security Ministry is the most downloaded app in the country, thanks to state-sponsored promotion. The anti-fraud app developed by China's Public Security Ministry, which filters spam calls and warn users of incoming calls from abroad, is now the most popular mobile app in the country, thanks to state-sponsored promotion campaign. Well, that helps when the state is developing the app and promoting the app. That makes sense. It's the most common app. The fact that it's a spam call blocker also is not much of a surprise. It's also one of the top 5 apps in all of India. Happens to be an app from Stockholm by two friends of mine. So hello to Alan Nami, who created Truecaller, which every Indian person knows very well. It's been one of the top 5 apps in all of India for many years running now. But it's an app from Stockholm, and they became a mega unicorn by servicing the Indian market.
The one in China, have they started preloading it on local devices yet?
I don't know if why not preload it? Yeah. The next one from Gareth is, the headline reads, humans can develop a sixth sense, study proves. And what is that sixth sense? Let's find out right now, shall we? Let me open this article here. And Gareth, if you're listening, please send the direct link, not the Apple News link. Going forward, it's from Popular Mechanics. And it says, as animals go, humans have relatively limited senses. We can't smell as well as dogs, see as many colors as shrimp, or find our way home using Earth's magnetic poles as sea turtles do. But there's one animal sense we can learn, bat-like echolocation. And the idea is some researchers in Japan say that they have helped with the ability to recognize three-dimensional acoustic patterns. Examining how humans acquire new sensing abilities to recognize environments using sound or echolocation may lead to understanding the flexibility of the human brain. We may also be able to gain insights into sensing strategies of other species by comparing. Well, we don't need that. I grew up with a blind friend who precisely did use echolocation with the sounds of clicks with his mouth to navigate rooms he had never been in before. And he knew where doorways were in a room by using echolocation, by making click sounds as a child. So yes, of course, humans can do this. We're already doing it in limited cases. So that might be a more interesting space to test, actually. So the next one is from Adriana, who sent. Oh, we covered this one. It was the one from Vice about anti-vaxxers using TikTok. And then the next one's from Gareth, that Jeff Bezos funds the quest for eternal life. We read this. This is from the Times and the Sunday Times in the UK. It's being widely reported because he's just spent a whole lot of money. I think it was 100 million on a team who is hoping to reverse aging, similar to David Sinclair in Harvard.
By the way, he has not confirmed that yet.
Correct.
Just to be clear.
That's right. He's not confirmed it. Radeja sends in this one from The Verge. California bill to take aim at Amazon's productivity hacking. We covered that. Radeja also sent in one from the BBC that Brazil's Bolsonaro new bill will limit tech giants' power to remove content. The president signs a decree aimed at requiring firms to provide just cause before removing posts. It's not so different than what we had in Florida, where some sides of the aisle are worried about censorship and being silenced, and now they're passing laws to make it difficult to have their content removed. And Radeja sends in this one that China prosecutors drop case against former Alibaba employee accused of sexual assault. Wow, that was not expected. Last week, one of the biggest headlines in all of China was that Alibaba was in the hot seat because one of their former employees was accused of sexually assaulting a female colleague. And now Chinese prosecutors have dropped their case against the former Alibaba employee accused of sexually assaulting. And I got to say, that comes as a bit of a surprise. And to Radeja, I also say, as I said to Gareth, please send the direct link and not the Apple News link. It says Chinese prosecutors have dropped the case of the former Alibaba employee accused of sexually assaulting a female colleague, saying that they had determined he had committed forcible indecency, but not a crime. The employee, identified by his surname Wang, no pun intended, was detained by police last month after a female Alibaba employee posted an 11-page account here on Alibaba's intranet saying a manager and a client sexually assaulted her during a business trip to eastern China's Jinan city. She said superiors and human resources did not take her report seriously, triggering a fierce public backlash against the e-commerce giant, which later fired Wang and suspended other executives. Prosecutors, however, have approved the arrest of the client, who has been identified by his surname Zhang. Okay. Jinan police have accused both men of committing acts of forcible indecency, but not having provided details of the acts. The female employee in her account said she was mostly unconscious during the incident and woke up with her clothes removed. Reuters was unable to reach Wang or Zhang for comment. Alibaba said in response to the decision by prosecutors that it has a zero-tolerance policy for sexual misconduct. And the Jinan supermarket, Zhang's former employee, did not respond to an email for a request. Chinese law says those using violence or coercion to act indecently against others can be sentenced to as much as 5 years in prison, but does not define an indecent act. Alibaba dismissed 10 employees for sharing screenshots of the female colleague's account of sexual assault allegations. Okay. The next one up is from Poppy, where about the use of VR to prepare maritime crews for terrorist and piracy attacks. Learn how to deal with pirates through VR. That's not a use case I had expected, I'll be honest. Emerging technologies this week about sea blindness, the tendency towards ignorance of the role and the importance of familiarity with what's happening on the high seas, using VR to combat piracy, like pirates taking over your ship. So now you can train yourself in VR for what to do when pirates try to take over your ship. The next one about how an edtech startup called Eruditus entered the Unicorn Club in India. The firm rocked the edtech charts by making Ivy League education accessible and affordable to executives across the globe. Weibo, the Twitter of China, suspends 21 Korean pop fan accounts for irrational star-chasing behavior as the CCP cracks down on precisely that, irrational star-chasing behavior. Uncle G doesn't like it, and now it's been banned. And then CNN reports on a new material that can measure your heart rate through your shirt. A group of researchers has developed a new material they say is as soft as cotton, but as strong as Kevlar, and as conductive as any metal. And it can measure your heartbeat and your heart rate through your shirt. And a company called CellX just got $4.3 million to deliver 3D printed pork in China. The Shanghai-based food tech startup CellX is the second round of funding, having recently debuted its 3D printed pork, cell-based pork, 3D printed. Cheryl?
I hate.
Are you going to eat the 3D printed cell-based pork?
If you know anything about Chinese people and pork,
it's a hit.
We freaking love it more than I think Americans love bacon.
Another company, Mia Tech, unveils plans to 3D print pork and enter chicken fat production in 2022. 3D printing. The nominations of the 2021 3D Printing Industry Awards are now open. Who do you think should make the shortlist for this year's show? Maybe the 3D pork company. And
it's really interesting that they're choosing that the 3D printing, I'm guessing, is to get it into a specific shape, because normally with these things you want to grow them and then you want the cells to sort of interconnect with each other, and then you want to sort of put the cells under stress to give them the kind of texture that meat and muscle normally has. By 3D printing it, then you need it to be in some sort of paste form. And then obviously it's I don't know, drying or curing or something like that setting, so it would be more akin to the texture of a chicken nugget, like a processed chicken nugget. So that's, I suppose, if you're covering it in like breading it and then like just dipping it in a sauce, it's not going to be as noticeable. But it's just interesting if they're 3D printing it into like a pork chop shape. I can't see that having the texture that you would expect.
The next one's from BB, that Volkswagen revealing a new prototype of an electric autonomous van for production next year. And it will be used to move people around. And the next one is from Rengent about a company called AID. An identity and compliance platform has closed a pre-seed investment round of $500,000 from angel investors, including former employees of Robinhood and Square and Snap, which means those apps will likely use this startup. AID, an identity and compliance platform with a focus on high-risk clients, has closed pre-seed investment round of $500,000 from very notable angels. And I just tweeted it out, and basically it will provide identity verification for users in a kind of giving you a kind of ID passport that you can then use between apps. And it allows an app to onboard you with your verified IDs. And that's a huge benefit to apps, because they don't want to go through the headache and hassle of identifying you. And it makes sense that one company do that and then allow they go through the hassle of identifying you, and then they can partner with all the other apps who want verified users, rather than every app having to figure it out on their own. So it's quite a brilliant space to get into. The next one's from Cami, about fish eyes grow in a petri dish from embryonic stem cells. You want to touch on this one, Cami? From Heidelberg University has demonstrated that complex retinal tissue can be cultured in a petri dish from embryonic stem cells of bony fish. The next one is Shopee, which everyone in Southeast Asia knows. It's kind of one of the Amazon-like startups out of Southeast Asia, is now going to Europe, starting in Poland. And Indian startups raised $12 billion through June. And Gabby sends in this one that from CNBC that tech giants are rushing to develop their own chips. Here's why. Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Tesla, and Baidu are all shunning established chip firms and bringing certain aspects of chip development in-house. Yes, there's all kinds of benefits to doing that, actually. More than just one reason. The next one's from Nilormi from Deutsche Welle in Germany, that the G20 aims for global vaccine distribution pact. The world's leading economies are discussing plans to increase distribution of vaccines to poorer countries. And Nilormi also sends in this one from DW that Palestinians escape high-security Israeli prison. The Hollywood-style escape took place at a maximum security facility about 2 miles from the boundary with the occupied West Bank. And BB sends in this cheerful one that the new Mu COVID-19 variant, which is claimed to be more contagious than Delta and less treatable with vaccines, is now in 49 U.S. states. Health officials believe Mu is even more transmissible than Delta variant and has more potential to resist vaccines. And it's now in just only 49 U.S. states. You know, all of them. So hold on to your hats if you
and evades detection, which is why I'm shitting myself as I'm babying a cold.
Oh, it's causing you to shit yourself? Is that one of the symptoms?
It's causing me to shit myself and baby my cold.
Oh, Jesus.
It's not in Nebraska yet, so Nebraska apparently has, and I think Nebraska also has water, Tyler, so maybe people should move there.
The sadistic part of me wants these variants to continue emerging so we can just find out what happens once we run out of Greek letters.
That's a good question. After Omega,
it'll start sounding like fraternity names.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Oh, God. The AE Pi variant.
I've got the Chi Beta Delta. The
So you go out and the future in 2030 is going to look like this. You're going to go out. You're going to wake up from. I'm going to wake up from a coma, right? I was a fraternity guy, and so I'm going to wake up and be like, dude, when did all these people start like going into like Beta, Theta, Pi or whatever? And I'll be like, no, that's the variant they have.
NASA's Perseverance rover on Mars collects the first Mars rock sample, according to NASA. The rock core is now enclosed in an airtight titanium sample tube and will be available for retrieval in the future. Let's leave it on that happy note, shall we? And thank yous to everybody for yet another headline-filled tech news around the world. We will meet again tomorrow. Click on the title of the room to see the schedule, and have a wonderful Wednesday wherever you happen to be, everybody.
Thank you. There is a MedTech room going on now.